Am I the asshole for cutting ties with my family after years of being overshadowed by my disabled sister's needs and feeling invisible? Emily, my younger sister, has always been the center of my family's existence. Even though she is a year younger than me, it has always seemed to me like she lives in a completely different universe that is solely centered on her. Because Emily was born with a physical disability and ongoing health problems, her life was filled with doctor's appointments, treatments, and special accommodations. Naturally, my parents devoted nearly all of their time and energy to making her life as easy and happy as possible, and I could see why. Nevertheless, it also meant that I was abandoned at a very young age. I took on the role of the easy and healthy kid, which came with the expectation that I needed less care and upkeep. I learned early on not to worry about it because Emily's needs always came first. I would nearly always stay behind when Emily couldn't, either at Aunt Linda's or with a neighbor, depending on Emily's ability to cope. They would frequently say, "We will bring you next time." But I never felt like it would happen. I didn't simply miss the big family holidays. Emily was almost always at the center of even the small everyday activities, like going to the park, buying ice cream, or watching a movie with the family. Sometimes I could comprehend it logically, but it still hurts emotionally. Her needs always came first, even though I would be excited about the idea of us all doing something together. I felt unnoticeable. The first time I truly felt the weight of being forgotten was on one of my birthdays. I must have been 8 or 9 years old by then. There was no cake, no celebration, and no acknowledgement of the day. I woke up that morning with the thought that maybe, just possibly, something unexpected was in store for me. However, as the day went on, it became very evident that my parents had completely forgotten my birthday. Their main goal was to get Emily to a concert that she had been anticipating for several months. They talked enthusiastically about the performance when they got home. As I listened, I questioned if they were even aware that it was supposed to be my special day. It wasn't until the next morning that my mother realized her error. Even while I appreciated the gift card she hurriedly grabbed as an afterthought, it was painfully obvious that the excitement of Emily's concert far outweighed my birthday in their universe. For many years, this pattern persisted. My parents were constantly focusing on Emily, and I was expected to accept that. Being understanding at all times, avoiding conflict, and blending in while everyone else's needs were taken care of was a heavy burden for a young youngster. I felt more noticed and appreciated whether I was by myself or at friends' houses, so I started spending more time there. A year ago was my 10th birthday. For weeks, I had been hinting that I wanted to do something fun. Like go to the arcade or throw a pizza party. It was significant to me because I was finally getting close to double digits. As my birthday drew near, however, it became very evident that nothing was scheduled. I wanted them to surprise me, but I forced myself not to get excited. Maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. On the morning of my birthday, however, there was no celebration. There was no mention of it during breakfast, and the day went by like any other. Emily was the center of attention because she had been having a rough week with her health. Even though I knew she required more attention, I still felt disappointed. My school friends recalled, wished me a happy birthday, and even collected some money to buy me ice cream for lunch. It was a small thing, but it made the day seem less empty. I thought maybe my folks would remember when I got home that afternoon. However, the house was silent and my mother was on the phone setting up Emily's next therapy session. My father was still working. It should come as no surprise that no one acknowledged that today was supposed to be mine. Trying to make the most of it, I went to my room. What is the point of saying anything? It wouldn't make people remember, and it certainly wouldn't make them feel sorry. The following day my mother finally realized she had missed my birthday again. She apologized and explained how busy she had been with Emily. As usual, I nodded and claimed it was all right, but it wasn't. Even though I knew in my heart how things would work out, they assured me that we would make up for it that weekend. I desired to have faith in them. We stayed at home during the weekend though, because Emily wasn't feeling well enough to go out. Rather than celebrating or doing something special for Emily, we watched her favorite movies. As an afterthought, my dad brought home a store-bought cake, but by that point, it felt more like a consolation prize than a celebration. It served as yet another sobering reminder that in my home, Emily's needs and desires always came first. I had given up on having many dreams by the time I turned 12. I didn't focus on making any requests or offering any agenda suggestions. I spent the entire day playing video games, doing my homework, and helping out around the house. That year, my parents did remember to wish me a happy birthday, but there was a brief acknowledgement before everything was back to normal. That day, Emily went to see another doctor, and she was the center of attention again. That birthday hurt the most. Even though it wasn't particularly awful, not because of anything noteworthy, but rather because of how typical everything was. Habitual neglect as opposed to malicious neglect. My needs barely registered since my parents were so accustomed to giving Emily all of their attention. They neglected not just my birthdays but also my accomplishments in school, my hobbies, and the things I held dear. The acknowledgement was swiftly followed by dismissal. Resignation hardened by the disappointment. I stopped expecting something different as I grew older and realized that this was just the way things were. Celebrations of friends' birthdays began to act as a reminder of what might occur. At home, however, the story was consistently the same. As the years went by, I became accustomed to my invisibility. My parents constantly seemed to be somewhere else, so I learned to have modest expectations. It wasn't like they didn't care about me in their own way. Even though Emily's requests were always more urgent, more immediate, and somehow more important, I started to emotionally distance myself, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. It was easier to be satisfied with coming in second, third, or not at all, and it was easier to not expect anything. During all of this, my grandparents were my lifeline. They were the ones that noticed the small details about me and gave me a sense of importance. Every time I went to their house, I had the impression that I had entered a different realm where I could see myself. Making everything unique was something my grandmother was particularly skilled at. Each time I went to see her, she let me pick out something to bake. No matter what we made, cookies, cupcakes, or even simple spaghetti, she had an old recipe book that was worn and battered. Her kitchen was our thing. My childhood was filled with joy on such afternoons. She made sure I understood that I was more than just another kid, I was her grandson. Grandpa, however, was the reserved type. Although he didn't say much, he was trustworthy and always present. He loved model trains. His basement was crammed with tracks, little houses and miniature scenery. I loved how he included me in something he enjoyed, not because I was a rail enthusiast. It was the only area where I didn't feel like an afterthought, and I spent hours down there with him. My grandparents complimented me on every small achievement I made that my parents didn't notice. After I scored my first soccer goal, Grandma prepared a special dinner and baked a cake. Grandpa even put the ball I used in the game in a small display in the living room. They made it feel like a huge deal in their place. Even though it was just a local soccer match, it was important to them because it was important to me. However, such pleasant things are always taken away by life. It was 3 years ago that Grandma fell unwell. It was a long fall, reflecting the slow erosion of my childhood happiness. It wasn't abrupt. She continued to attempt baking with me at first, but as her condition worsened, our sessions shifted to my sitting next to her bed and holding her hand as she slept. Long before she was gone, I missed her. Her death truly broke my heart. It felt like losing everything when I lost the one person who gave me a sense of belonging. The funeral went very quickly. There were many faces expressing sorrow, but it didn't feel genuine. Although Grandma was no longer with me, it felt more like a piece of me had. After that, Grandpa changed. His once warm eyes became aloof. Our visits decreased, and he stopped hanging around with his trains. What had been my sanctuary felt chilly and empty now. Because the house was too full of memories, Grandpa eventually went into a nursing home in a different city. I could understand why it was sold, but it still felt like another aspect of my youth had been lost. It wasn't the same when we went to see him once a month. The antiseptic visitor's room lacked the coziness that had previously made our time together memorable, and our visits were short. We were both unable to mend the raw wound caused by Grandma's absence. The barrier against the loneliness I experienced at home disappeared after Grandma left and Grandpa moved far away. Everything became controlled by Emily's needs, and life resumed as it had always been. The contrast, however, was suddenly even more noticeable. My grandparents made me visible where my parents had unintentionally rendered me invisible. It was absorbed by every family decision, every discussion, and every medical procedure Emily had. My words appeared to disappear as soon as they left my lips when I tried to discuss friends or school. They didn't appear to be picked up. I became more reclusive at home, and I typically declined friends' invitations to hang out at the university. It was easier to avoid queries about why I felt the need to pretend everything was all right or why I was always so miserable. Everyone was aware of Emily, of course, but nobody had any real idea what it was like to live in her shadow. Since Emily did not select her health problems, I felt ashamed, but that did not make the actual suffering of neglect any less genuine. Specifically, the guilt was awful. I felt terrible because I wanted more attention. And I was upset that Emily was constantly given priority. Feeling important was more important than merely getting attention. Despite my parents' best efforts, I still felt like I was peering in from the outside. At this point, I brought up family therapy for the first time, but I had no idea what to anticipate. I thought I'd give it a shot. My parents consented, much to my surprise. Maybe they thought a professional could assist close the growing distance between us, or maybe they didn't know what else to do. In any case, we were seated in a calm office with a therapist who appeared sincere in wanting to hear from each of us. We started going to therapy sessions on a regular basis. I was a little optimistic at first that things might get better. I was able to finally communicate what I had been experiencing for a long time early on in those sessions. I expressed my desire for them to take notice of my hobbies and recognize my achievements, as well as how it felt to be the one neglected. It had been a while since I felt as though my parents were actually paying attention or that they recognized the profound impact their deeds, or lack thereof, had on me. They appeared taken aback, possibly even shocked. Tears, apologies, and vows to improve were exchanged. For a few moments we appeared to be moving forward. My parents paid closer attention and were more considerate. They found time for me alone, for things that weren't Emily's purview. We went bowling, saw a movie, and visited a museum. Even though it was unpleasant at first, it felt great to be the center of attention for a brief while. But Emily was aware of the shift. Since she wasn't used to sharing the limelight, her jealousy quickly surfaced. Small remarks like how much fun we must have had without her or how wonderful it was for her to have some alone time at home were the first subtleties. However, those comments quickly became more. She sobbed throughout dinner one night, saying my parents were favoring me and ignoring her. According to her, the reason they loved me more was because I was normal. My parents were shocked by the accusation and hurried to console her. We started to lose the delicate equilibrium we had been establishing. We stopped going on family vacations as often, and when we did, Emily's jealousy took center stage. My parents went back to their old methods because they couldn't decide whether to include me or control Emily's emotions. It quickly became evident that I was only living in Emily's reality once more. I felt bad for disturbing things, so I proposed that we resume our regular routine. I decided that accepting my position on the sidelines would make things simpler for everyone. However, our therapist disapproved of that notion, reminding us that the purpose of treatment was to disrupt these negative habits rather than to strengthen them. Even though it seemed like we were going nowhere, we persisted. The majority of our sessions were dominated by Emily's sentiments of envy and abandonment. Even in therapy, which was meant to benefit all of us, she continued to take center stage. Despite my frustration, I failed to find a solution. One session reached a breaking point when Emily accused my parents of loving and preferring me more. My parents went into a self-doubting, guilt-ridden spiral after the accusation. The progress we had been making was compromised as they rushed to reassure her. It was tiring to see the same patterns being repeated over and over. I started to question whether going on with therapy was really necessary. I was so exhausted. I was simply exhausted and no longer upset. I'm tired of attempting to articulate how I feel and of holding out hope that things will improve. I began withdrawing once more, both from the treatment sessions and from my family. I started to lose the tiny hope I'd been holding on to, the hope that perhaps things could be different. That change occurred within me. I came to terms with the fact that this was the way life would be. Therapy had become just another ritual in which I expressed my emotions, only for Emily's desires and sentiments to take precedence over mine. My parents couldn't come see me since they were too involved in Emily's life. I accepted that information as true. I had lost my anger. I had exerted every effort to draw their attention to me and help them comprehend what it was like to be ignored. However, it was obvious that they were set in their ways, and I was out of energy to challenge it. I started to completely stop going to therapy. What use was it to repeat the same things over and over again if nothing was going to change? My parents were aware of my increasing distance, but they were unsure of how to respond. They seemed to be only going through the motions when they tried to interact with me. Whether they inquired about my day or made awkward attempts to strike up a conversation over dinner, there was no genuine connection. My withdrawal was also observed by Emily. She had a mixed response. On the one hand, she was glad that she was once again the center of attention. There were still a lot of questions, on the one hand. She started questioning me about trivial topics, such as my after-school activities and the games I was playing. She didn't know how to connect, and to be honest, I didn't either by this point. We were both unable to overcome the hurdles that had been put in place by years of mistrust and misunderstanding. I began focusing on my studies and personal hobbies. I made friends, joined groups, and concentrated on things that had nothing to do with home. It was comforting to be surrounded by people who knew Emily yet recognized me for more than just her sibling. I came to understand that I didn't need my family's approval by spending more time at school and with friends. I could establish my own personality without having to worry for my sister's demands. One day, during a particularly difficult therapy session, everything came to a head. I had been listening in silence as the therapist brought up Emily's sentiments of envy and desertion once more. She was always the focus. I had made an effort to speak up earlier in the session, describing how it felt to be repeatedly ignored. However, the topic quickly returned to Emily's difficulties. I was used to it at this point, yet it seemed different that day. Perhaps it was the years of frustration building up, or maybe it was the understanding that I had had enough. I paused the session after taking a deep breath. I told them everything. I had the impression that my family was looking straight through me. How I had given up on the idea that things would be different. How Emily's needs always came first and birthdays, accomplishments, and little moments had become meaningless. I described how agonizing it was to watch them defend the necessity of the current situation and how I had finally realized that nothing would change. The room was quiet after I was done. My parents were surprised, as if they were unaware of how deeply I was hurting. The harm was already done, even though the therapist made an effort to steer the discussion in a more constructive direction. My parents defended themselves rather than owning up to the damage they had caused me. They discussed how difficult it was to balance everything, how important Emily's health was and how they were trying their hardest. Emily joined in, saying I was attempting to make her feel awful over something she couldn't control. When she was the one dealing with actual difficulties, she accused me of being selfish for seeking attention. I wasn't surprised by what she said, even though it hurt. The hidden lesson that my feelings were not as significant as hers was one I had heard before. The therapist made an effort to diffuse the situation, but the damage had already been done. That's when I knew nothing would change. My parents were unable to see past Emily's needs, and Emily was only able to see her own difficulties. I never really succeeded in making room for myself, so I was caught in the center. For me, that session was a turning moment. I made the decision to stop trying to make things better. I kept being caught between Emily's and my own demands after that. Now though, I was simply worn out. I had lost my anger. Peace was what I desired. The conflict was no longer interesting. I became progressively more reclusive during the following few weeks. I concentrated on my studies, looking for internships, college scholarships, and any opportunity to travel far from home and be independent at last. I started searching for distant colleges where I could start over without having to worry about the dynamics of my family. I craved distance, both physically and emotionally, even though I loved my family. I rejected my parents' suggestion that we consult a different therapist to get a different viewpoint. I had given up on attempting to fix anything that was too damaged. Despite their apparent disappointment, they didn't press the issue, either because they were growing weary of the never-ending battle or because they were starting to realize that some wounds couldn't be healed. However, Emily didn't appear to notice that I was withdrawing. She was once again the center of attention, and she was perfectly content with it. Every now and again she would inquire about my plans, but our discussions never progressed past the obvious. I didn't see a way to close the distance between us now that we had drifted apart. I became more and more preoccupied about my future. I applied to colleges, went to college campuses, and put myself into getting ready for life beyond high school. My grades improved, my friendships grew stronger, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was making progress toward a personal goal. I was creating a life apart from Emily, my parents, and the never-ending cycle of letdown. In the end, I received acceptance to a college in a different state. I could travel home if necessary, but it was still distant enough for me to be independent. When I told my parents, they were pleased for me, but I also felt sad. They must have seen that this was my method of bidding farewell to the family dynamics that had continuously molded me. They made no effort to persuade me to remain nearer to home. Rather, they only sent me their best wishes and said they would come see me when they could. I felt as though a burden had been removed when I left home. The independence that came with living alone thrilled me. I moved into a tiny dorm room after packing my belongings. The initial weeks were peculiar. The silence and the lack of Emily's incessant demands were unfamiliar to me. However, I quickly adapted to my new existence. I joined groups, made new friends, and found that I liked having my own identity. I was able to be myself for the first time in years, not the forgotten sibling, not an afterthought, just me. It was freeing. I discovered that I didn't miss home as much as I had anticipated as the months went by. Even though I continued to communicate with my parents, the distance gave me the freedom to unwind and discover my identity without having to worry about family responsibilities. I became aware that the resentment I had harbored for so long was beginning to lessen when we spent time apart. I no longer had animosity toward Emily, and I was no longer upset with my parents. Even though I hadn't always appreciated their best efforts, I now realized that they had done the best they could. Learning to let go of my expectations brought me serenity. Life in college was enjoyable. I was surrounded by individuals who noticed me, paid attention to me, and gave me a sense of acceptance. These close companions turned into family. We commemorated accomplishments, birthdays, and even the minor triumphs that my family had frequently disregarded. I was no longer only an afterthought for the first time. Being a part of something was an incredible feeling. Even though I had discovered a new sense of belonging, I still missed my family. I stayed in touch, but we only had surface-level interactions. The deeper problems that had afflicted us for so long were never explored. Reopening old wounds was something I wasn't sure I was ready for. So, liberated from the shadow of my past, I carried on living my life and making it genuinely mine. It wasn't flawless, but it was sufficient. I had been looking for a place where I could just be myself all my life. I had finally located that location. With time, the distance between my family and I became more about emotional isolation than it was about geographic distance. I was finally starting my own life without the burden of my family's past. I wasn't just existing at college, I was thriving. For the first time, I felt appreciated and seen for who I was, not only for what other people at home had classified me as, and I made friends who truly liked me. I would still occasionally contact home, mostly out of duty, but those conversations always felt pointless. My parents would nod courteously when I told them about my friends or school, but it was always obvious that Emily was still very important to them emotionally. As soon as I brought up her name, the topic of conversation would go back to her most recent health information, difficulties she was facing, and how she was handling everything. When it felt that my life was merely a footnote in their world, it was hard to stay involved in such discussions. I couldn't fully give up on the possibility that things would change in the future though. I was depressed even though I had long since moved on from the grudge. There was still a secret longing for a family that would embrace me the way they did Emily. My parents would simply give me a quick phone call or a fast text message to mark milestones, holidays, and birthdays. I had given up on expecting anything more by that point. I rejoiced with my pals, who had become my real family. They were the ones who made me feel important, who remembered my birthday, and who were there for me when I needed them. During my last year of college, I made the decision to spend Christmas at home 1 year. Since I hadn't been there in a long time, I reasoned that perhaps enough time had gone by for things to feel different. Perhaps I had changed and matured enough to manage the dynamics that had before overwhelmed me. The house was the same when I got there, yet something felt different. Maybe I was the difference. Perhaps the area that had made me feel so small was now too small for me. My parents' cordial welcome gave me a fleeting optimism that this visit would be unique. However, the old patterns quickly reappeared. Once more, Emily was at the center of every discussion, her needs, her challenges, her accomplishments. I listened politely, but as the days passed, I noticed that I was emotionally withdrawing and reverting to the corner I had occupied for so long. It seemed as though I had never been gone. Christmas morning was the decisive moment. My folks hadn't remembered to buy me anything. There was nothing for me as we sat around the tree exchanging gifts, no name-branded item, no sign of appreciation. I saw Emily's happiness light up the room as she opened her presents. My parents valued her so highly that they were oblivious to my silent existence. My life had been fashioned by years of overlooked milestones, forgotten birthdays, and subtle neglect, all of which were brought back to me in that moment. This time, however, I experienced acceptance rather than rage or sadness. I had finally come to the point where I didn't require their approval or affirmation. I didn't need them to congratulate me because I had learned to do it on my own. I silently packed my belongings that night and departed early the next morning. There was no conflict, no spectacular departure. I was aware that I had at last reconciled with my childhood family. Knowing they wouldn't change, I just turned away. However, I realized that I no longer required their space. In a family that didn't know how to provide for me, I had spent years trying to find a place for myself. In the world I had created for myself, I had discovered that place somewhere. Life continued. I got a job in a distant place after graduating with honors from college. It was everything I had ever wanted. A new beginning, a clean slate, unencumbered by my family's past, and the freedom to become who I truly wanted to be. For the first time, I felt genuinely pleased with what I had achieved, and my friends joined me in celebrating by throwing a party in my honor. I became acutely aware that my happiness was independent of my family after spending time apart from them. We never delved into the underlying concerns that had created our relationship. Instead, our interactions remained superficial when I periodically visited home. And that was all right. I had given up attempting to alter the fact that Emily would always come first for my parents. As the years passed, my life kept changing in unforeseen ways. I created a life that felt completely unique, surrounded myself with people who appreciated me, and got a job I enjoyed. I had discovered how to be happy without looking to my parents for attention or praise. I still occasionally think about my family, including Emily and her life to this day, as well as my parents, who still focus on her. I'm curious whether they ever consider me. If they ever consider what they missed or how things ended. I don't think about it though. I've moved on and accepted that things will always be difficult in my connection with them. In my opinion, a family is made up of everyone who supports you, accepts you for who you are, and loves you without conditions, not only your biological relatives. With more love and support than I ever imagined, my friends have grown to be like family. Though I've learned to love myself enough to let go of the desire for their approval, I will always adore my parents. The fact that I've created a happy life is ultimately what counts. I am incredibly thankful for the lessons I have learned, the strength I have acquired, and the person I have become as I sit here now and think back on the path that has led me to this point. I never lost myself, even though my family may have forgotten me in many ways. And that's what matters most of all, I've come to realize. My brother stole my girlfriend and framed me. Now, 6 years later, they're all begging for forgiveness. I, 24M, feel as though the ones who were meant to love me the most have ripped my life apart. I'm still having trouble accepting that this all began 6 years ago. I had been dating Emily, 24F, since high school. We grew up with our parents, who were childhood friends, and our families were quite close. I believed that I would eventually wed her. We had acquaintances, attended the same schools, and even took family trips together. I genuinely thought we would be together forever because she was my first love. Alex, 28M, my older brother, comes next. He has always been my parents' favorite child, smart, gregarious, and successful. Before everything broke apart, I didn't think it would matter. Emily accused me of sexually assaulting her 6 years ago. I was caught off guard. Why would she say something like that when we had been together for years? It was unbelievable to me. Alex intervened and supported her, which made everything worse. He claimed to have been protecting her when he told our parents that he had witnessed me acting improperly toward her at a party. My parents immediately accepted his story. My side of the story wasn't even requested. They had complete faith in Emily and Alex. The entire community turned against me and I was expelled from the house in a matter of days. I had considered Emily's family to be a second family, but they also severed all connections. My reputation, my family, and my girlfriend were all lost. My parents informed me that unless I received assistance for something I hadn't even done, they would not want to see me again. I had nowhere to go at the age of 18. In the end, I crashed at a friend's house, but I was devastated on an emotional level. I resorted to drunkenness and melancholy, doing everything to dull the hurt of being dumped and wrongly accused by the people I trusted most. I had a hard time moving on for years. I started going to treatment, moved to a new city, and gradually started to restore my life. But I was still troubled by the treachery. I was so afraid that others would be unfaithful to me like Emily and Alex that dating was practically impossible. I never made an effort to get in touch with my family, and they never did. They expelled me on false pretenses, and I couldn't forgive them for it. Then everything changed around 6 months ago. Lisa, an old friend of Emily's, contacted me. She informed me she had to confess something because she could no longer bear the guilt. Lisa disclosed that while we were still together, Emily and Alex had been seeing one other behind my back. They had been in love for years. They made up the fake accusation to get me out of the picture when Emily decided to leave me for Alex. Alex was confident that my parents would believe him, and it was successful. After I got kicked out, Emily and Alex started dating. They are now married and appear to be leading a beautiful life, while I was left to deal with the fallout. Lisa went to my parents after being honest with me. She wanted them to know that they had thrown away their son for a lie because she could no longer bear to know the reality. My folks were surprised. Lisa clarified how Alex had deceived Emily and how they had both made me the victim. Soon after, my parents contacted me and begged to meet and speak. They were inconsolable, sobbing over the phone as they apologized for not trusting me. They acknowledged that their love for Emily and their faith in Alex had caused them to become blinded. Initially, I was angry instead of feeling satisfied that I had finally been proven right. They wanted to make things right as if nothing had happened, even if it took them 6 years to discover the truth. The worst thing? Alex and Emily are forgiven. According to my parents, family is family, and what's done is done. They have even let Emily back into their lives and still adore Alex. They now want us all to make amends, move on from the past, and pretend that I wasn't destroyed by the previous 6 years. Their most recent attempts to contact me have gone unanswered. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to forgive them for their actions. Because Alex and Emily are family, they expect me to simply get over it after throwing me out on false pretenses and leaving me when I most needed them. So, even after my family learned the truth, am I the fool for severing our relationship? Relevant comments. Telling them that you don't want to be a part of their life as long as they continue to have Alex and Emily in them is quite reasonable. They ought to hold Alex and Emily accountable and disown them if they genuinely regret their actions. That makes perfect sense. Definitely not a fool. I don't think I would want them back either, given the harm done and the 6 years it took to find out. The golden child will always be preferred by parents like them. It required a bystander to come forward and expose this horrible plot 6 years after the OP lost all ties to his former life. I would really consider bringing a slander lawsuit against OP's brother and his ex because they are all terrible people. The members of your family wish to ignore this. They ought to have invested the same amount of effort in repairing your reputation and severing your connections with Emily and Alex. Going back to this familial dynamic would only make things worse for you. Moving on with your life and avoiding further pain is the wisest course of action. Update. Hello to everybody. I've read all of the suggestions and remarks made by others. I want to start by saying thank you so much for your support, which truly helped me put things in perspective. Since I tend to act rashly, I spoke with my therapist and close friends following this incident and made a decision. I've made the decision that neither Emily nor Alex will face legal action from me, nor will I pursue retribution of any kind. I simply want this to end after everything I've been through. They and my family are not worth any more of my energy. I need to move on because dragging this through the legal system for slander or defamation will simply make me feel more bound to the past. It became evident to me after speaking with my therapist that retaining the anger was only making me feel worse. I choose not to allow this to rekindle old scars since I've spent so many years starting over in my life, through therapy, overcoming my alcoholism, landing a job I enjoy and developing a new network of genuine friends. I decided to let my family know that I don't want to communicate with them. I clarified that I have no interest in reliving the past or acting as though things could return to as they were. I wished them well and expressed my hope that they would be able to move on without me. I then blocked their phone numbers. Alex and Emily purchased burner phones with new numbers to call me for a few hours, but I haven't returned any of their calls. Their insistence on apologizing and reassembling the family only after everyone else has discovered what they truly did enrages me. Some may argue that I ought to have put up a stronger fight or held them accountable, but I'm done. I no longer require their approval or an apology. I have decided to permanently close this chapter. Positively, news of Emily and Alex's actions spread throughout the community. Since I was raised in a tiny town, I suppose word got around fast. My parents have been publicly humiliated, and people are now boycotting Alex's company. To get away from the city, Emily's parents and I are considering relocating to the country. I am aware of this because I am constantly receiving messages about how my activities are impacting others, which is, to be honest, rather crazy. Nevertheless, I am somewhat proud that they aren't getting away with it. A few others also wanted to know how I made ends meet. This occurred after I'd graduated from high school. With student loans, I was able to enroll in a comparatively good college because of my respectable grades. Before I landed a job in my profession, I worked at a few odd jobs. Although it's a starting salary, it's better than what I had previously. Since I was able to live with friends after college, I must admit that, in spite of my enormous student loan debt, I'm very content with my life given everything I've gone through. I also wanted to address the claims made by some that this was a hoax because of my previous posts. It is a joint account between myself and my pals. We may have come together because we have all experienced trauma and difficult family issues. However, I would like to thank everyone for their support and guidance. 6 years have passed, and it still seems unbelievable that I could have experienced any of this. I felt more confident to take the necessary action after reading your advice. Thank you. I'm hoping that this will allow me to go forward without turning around. My best friend abandoned her baby with me, now she's back to take her for a trust fund inheritance after her mother-in-law's death. We were freshmen at State University in 2013, which is when I first met Penelope, 29F. Our first encounter occurred when she wanted to borrow my notes after missing class due to the flu. We were both majoring in computer science. Following that, we began attending lectures together and eventually found ourselves in the same study group. We had a close-knit group of friends during our first 2 years of college. 6 of us would get together every Friday to study in the campus coffee shop before going to the neighborhood pizza place for dinner. Because Penelope and I were both only kids from middle-class households attempting to succeed in the computer industry, we grew particularly close. Both of us found employment in the same city after graduating in 2017. She found a job at a startup about 20 minutes away, and I worked at a software business downtown. We maintained frequent communication, getting together for lunch on Wednesdays and spending weekends with other local college pals. Penelope began dating Mike, a sales representative for her employer, around the end of 2019. I never really liked him. Even if he first appeared fine. He would frequently arrive late to group gatherings or abruptly cancel plans with Penelope. He ended their relationship by text message after roughly 6 months of dating. Penelope called me in tears 2 weeks after the separation to tell me she was expecting a child. Mike quickly blocked her number and moved to his company's office in a different state after she told him. It was very apparent that he had no interest in the infant. Penelope had my support during her pregnancy. I became her primary support system because her parents resided in Florida and could only visit periodically. I assisted her in shopping for baby goods, attended all of her doctor's appointments, and even watched YouTube videos to learn how to assemble a cot. The birth date of Emily was March 15, 2021. Due to inclement weather, Penelope's parents' travel was delayed, so I was in the birth room. I saw how difficult it was for Penelope to connect with Emily during those initial days in the hospital. Penelope was aloof despite the nurses' attempts to assist her with nursing and basic baby care. I began visiting Penelope's apartment every day after work when they returned home. I would prepare dinner, assist Emily, and frequently remain until 11 o'clock or later. I would take Emily for a little while on the weekends so Penelope could get some rest or sleep. With a crib, changing table, and more baby items than I ever imagined having, my apartment turned into a second nursery. When Emily was about 6 months old, the issues began to worsen. Penelope would phone me in the middle of the night to tell me that Emily's crying was too much for her to handle. Occasionally, when I got there, Emily would be crying in her crib and Penelope would be sitting on the couch. Penelope began skipping work a lot and hardly ever left her apartment. Penelope was let go by her employer in January of 2022. She started skipping work without warning after using up all of her sick days. Things truly took a turn for the worst at that point. She stopped taking calls from relatives and friends. Unwashed laundry was all around her flat, and unclean dishes were piled up. At 3 a.m. on February 12, 2022, Penelope gave me a call. I could hardly understand her since she was crying so much. She claimed Emily deserved more and that she was a bad mother. She pleaded with me to let Emily stay for a few days so she could get her act together. I was concerned about both of them, so I agreed. The following morning, Penelope delivered Emily to my flat along with 3 big bags of supplies and clothing. After giving Emily a deep embrace, she hurried off, promising to call Emily shortly. At the time, Emily was 10 months old. Penelope texted Emily every day throughout the first week to inquire about her. She wanted to know if Emily missed her, if she was eating well, and if she was sleeping well. Every time I replied with pictures and updates. Her texts decreased in frequency and length throughout the second week. By the third week, when I asked her when she would return, she would only respond with a single word. A month later, she stopped answering altogether. I made every effort to get in touch with her. She had moved out when I tried to reach her via phone, text, email, and even in person at her apartment. She hadn't contacted her parents either. Despite my worries, I had to concentrate on Emily. I hired a part-time nanny to assist during video conferences and changed my work schedule to spend more time at home. Emily fared remarkably well. She was a cheerful baby all the time, and it seemed like having a regular routine helped. At about this time, she began referring to me as Dada. I initially attempted to correct her, but my mother claimed that since I was her primary caregiver it was only normal. I got a certified letter from a law firm 3 months after Penelope left. In the legal forms in the packet, Penelope was asking me to adopt Emily and renounce her parental rights. In a brief letter, she expressed her inability to become a mother and her belief that Emily would live a better life with me. I contacted a family lawyer right away to manage the adoption procedure. The lawyer stated that adoption was feasible because I had been Emily's primary caregiver for months and Penelope was voluntarily renouncing her rights. We had to conduct background checks, have social workers visit homes, and post notices in newspapers. Emily officially became my daughter on September 15, 2022 after a 4-month process. After that, life settled into a comfortable pattern. In order to be more accessible, I made the decision to work from home permanently. 3 days a week, Emily began attending a local preschool, which she adored. Her professors praised her for being well-adjusted and gregarious, and she made friends easily. Every month my parents travel from Ohio to visit us. They showered Emily with gifts and attention, embracing their role as grandparents. Every time Penelope's parents call to see how Emily is doing, I send them pictures and updates. They never put any pressure on me regarding Penelope since they understand that I am now Emily's father. As a single father, dating has been fascinating. I usually scare women away right away or pique their curiosity because I'm always honest about having a daughter. Emily is my top priority, and I won't compromise on that. As a result, my 2 romances, each lasting a few months, terminated. Up until last week, everything was good. A knock on the door interrupted my work in my home office. Emily was enrolled in preschool. Penelope was standing there when I opened the door, and she didn't look at all like I remembered her. She appeared healthy, had well-groomed hair, and wore pricey clothing. She said that she had received assistance and was now prepared to become a mother. She had been attending therapy and was doing well as a project manager. Her goal was to regain custody and begin dating Emily. Since she had revoked her rights and I had legally adopted Emily, I informed her that was not feasible. She broke down in tears, admitting that she had erred and that her despair had prevented her from thinking clearly at the time. She became irate and threatened to get a lawyer when I refused to back down. She promised to provide evidence that she was forced to renounce her rights. I instructed her to get out and that my lawyer would have to handle any correspondence. I'm worried now. Emily is content, safe, and thriving in our life together. She has no memory of Penelope. I had to share this somewhere, but I've already phoned my lawyer to be ready for whatever Penelope might try. I will not allow anyone to take my kid away. Update 1. Since I last posted, a lot has transpired. Penelope sued, saying she had terminated her rights when untreated postpartum depression was plaguing her. A 15-page affidavit from her attorney described how I allegedly exploited her mental state to remove Emily from her. The text exchanges from 2021 to 2022 that were contained in the dossier showed Penelope requesting my assistance with Emily. Even back then, her lawyer misrepresented these messages to suggest that I was attempting to become Emily's mom. They also claimed that I had been preparing to obtain custody all along because I had baby goods at my apartment. After Penelope reached out to our former college pals, they became interested. I stole Penelope's baby, according to some of their Facebook posts. Our study group member Tom called me and told me that I should realize that Penelope was ill when she gave up Emily. After I'd declined to talk about letting Penelope see Emily, Lisa, another college acquaintance, blocked me on all social media. However, not everyone took Penelope's side. In a lengthy Facebook post, my friend Mark, who had frequently assisted me with Emily, described how Penelope had utterly abandoned Emily and disregarded all of my attempts to get in touch with her. He provided screenshots of our attempts to contact her that went unanswered. Emily's preschool has been in a tense situation. The director called me last Tuesday to let me know that Penelope had been keeping an eye on Emily while they were playing outside. She claimed to be Emily's mother and the right to see her from the personnel. She gave them old pictures of herself with baby Emily when they asked for identification. She refused to leave when the school security guard urged her to. She initially insisted that all she wanted was to see her daughter. Before she departed, they had to threaten to contact the police. I had to leave work early to pick up Emily after the director phoned me right away. The following day, I was at the school for 3 hours, updating all of Emily's documents. I provided them with copies of the court orders proving my sole custody and the adoption documents. I made it plain that no one else could pick Emily up, but I did add my parents to the pickup list. They changed their security procedures and now verify everyone's identity, even their known parents. Penelope began delivering parcels to our home. The first one, a big box filled with new toys, clothing, and a plush pink elephant, arrived last Wednesday. She sent a lengthy letter outlining her reasons for leaving and her deep regret. She put notes on the back of each picture and included pictures of herself with Emily when she was a newborn. Over the course of the following week, 3 additional shipments came. One had children's books that contained private notes. A handcrafted photo album of Emily's first few months was in another. The final one has a tablet with videos of Penelope reading bedtime tales already loaded on it. Emily hasn't seen any of it, but I'm keeping it all as proof. Last Friday, Mrs. Chen, my next-door neighbor, called to report that someone had been parked outside our house for a number of hours. I noticed Penelope's white Honda Civic when I looked. She left before the cops arrived, even though I had contacted them. Although they filed a report, the police stated that they were powerless to take any action until she threatened us or made direct contact. I discovered a message in our mailbox 2 days ago. Penelope noted that in order to give Emily afternoons free, she had adjusted her work schedule. She provided a thorough plan outlining how she intended to begin with monitored visits before progressively moving on to overnight stays. "I will continue to fight until I get my daughter back," she said at the end of the note. Emily has begun to ask questions that I find difficult to respond to. At school, she noticed Penelope observing her and inquired about the identity of the woman. Emily continually brings up the fact that I used to know her, even after I told her. Emily inquired yesterday if the woman would take her away. She no longer wants to attend school and has grown needy. My parents offered to let us spend some time with them in Ohio. It would be safer for them to reside in a guarded community. I thought about it, but moving would require removing Emily from her friends and school. She already has enough stress and adjustments to handle. When they learned of what was going on, Penelope's parents gave me a call. The way Penelope behaved appalled them. After leaving Emily, Penelope also stopped communicating with them, according to her mother. They searched but were unable to locate her. 6 months ago, she contacted them to inform them not to get in touch with me any longer. That was the first time they heard from her. According to my attorney, we have a compelling case. The adoption was completed correctly, including all necessary waiting periods and notices. Throughout the process, Penelope had her own attorney and willingly signed all the documents. He cautioned though that Penelope's attorney might attempt to drag this out in the hopes that I would consent to shared custody in order to put an end to the legal dispute. The expenses are mounting quickly. My attorney thinks that if this gets to trial, the $5,000 in legal fees I've already paid could increase significantly. Even though I'm fortunate to have savings, it's still difficult. I don't want this situation to become any more public than it currently is, but several folks recommended creating a GoFundMe. I'm recording everything for the time being, including every shipment, every school appearance, and every unwelcome contact. I placed security cameras all around our home and recorded Penelope passing by. I also started recording a thorough vlog of Emily's symptoms, including her queries, behavioral changes, and nightmares. Observing Emily's fear and confusion is the most difficult aspect. Every time someone knocked, she used to dash to the door. She is now hiding in her room. She constantly asks me to swear that I won't abandon her the way her last mother did. I had no idea that she was aware that Penelope was her other mother. She must have heard something in school, I suppose. I want this to stop, yet I refuse to comply with Penelope's demands. Emily is my daughter, and she has known me for the majority of her life as her only father. If someone decides they want to have children right away, I won't allow them to ruin her life. Update 2. Penelope's unexpected interest in Emily can be explained by something significant I learned about her. I received a Facebook message from Rachel, a nurse who used to work with Penelope at her previous hospital employment. She informed me that Penelope is now married to a wealthy Boston businessman and had another child 6 months ago. I received screenshots of Penelope's picture-perfect life from Rachel's private social media sites. She publishes pictures of her new baby boy, writes about charitable activities, and resides in a big house in a wealthy suburb. She discusses how parenthood transformed her life and the pleasures of being a first-time mother in each post. As Penelope's supervisor, Rachel had access to Penelope's old work emails, which contained the most crucial information. Penelope talked about her mother-in-law's final illness and a family trust fund that would be given to all of her grandkids upon her passing in these emails from 8 months ago. My lawyer did additional research and discovered more information. Last year, Penelope wed Robert Anderson. In Massachusetts, his family operates a series of upscale auto dealerships. Robert and his whole family were informed by Penelope that she had never been married or had children. For more than a year, she has been sharing on social media about her first experiences with parenthood and her new daughter. We also learned that precisely 1 week after Robert's mother passed away, Penelope began her custody battle. Penelope's mother-in-law left a multi-million-dollar trust fund, designated only for her biological grandkids. Each grandchild receives an equal share at turning 25 in accordance with the conditions of the trust. Things began to make sense when the time frame was reviewed. 2 weeks before her mother-in-law's passing, Penelope started passing our house on her way home. Only a few days after the death, the custody lawsuit was filed. She wants Emily to inherit anything, but she isn't attempting to get Emily back because she wants to become a mother. Rachel sent us Penelope's text chats with her friend Kate, which contained the most unsettling evidence. Penelope noted that she had to bring Emily back before the specifics of the trust money were decided. She discussed how she could explain Emily's existence to Robert by claiming that she had previously been too embarrassed to do so. She even intended to claim that while she was starting her career, she had temporarily placed Emily in my care. My attorney presented all of this evidence to Penelope's attorney. Then, with both attorneys present, Penelope asked for a private meeting. She revealed everything during the meeting. She claimed that although she felt bad about parting with Emily, she hadn't considered doing so until she found out about the trust fund. She believed she could use the inheritance money to make one for her past transgressions and provide Emily with a better life. Finding out that Penelope had hired a private investigator to follow us 3 months prior, long before she arrived at our door, was what really infuriated me. The PI collected data about our daily schedule and took pictures of Emily at school. Penelope knew just when to visit our home and when to get Emily up from school because of this. Emily is feeling the effects of the situation. She now pulls her blanket into my room every night instead of sleeping in her own room. I discovered her attempting to fit her favorite toys into her school backpack last week. She told me that she wanted to be prepared in case she had to go like her old mom did when I questioned why. At school, she overheard children discussing how the woman observing them was someone's mother who had left. I concluded that Emily needed expert assistance to handle this circumstance. I discovered a child psychologist who focuses on custody and adoption matters. So far, we've had 2 sessions. According to the psychologist, Emily is exhibiting symptoms of anxiousness, but she believes that with steady support and stability, she will be all right. Through all of this, Penelope's parents have been unexpectedly supportive. All of Penelope's emails and communications throughout the years, including ones in which she expressly stated that she would never want to see Emily again, were forwarded to me. They also gave a statement explaining how, after leaving Emily, Penelope stopped communicating with them and refused their assistance. Next month is the scheduled court date. With all of the fresh information on Penelope's actual intentions, my lawyer is really optimistic about our case. In order to prevent Penelope from seeing Emily or me, he is submitting a motion for a permanent restraining order. My parents helped me pay for the more than $12,000 in legal bills I've incurred over the past month. They stated that rather than risk losing their granddaughter, they would choose to spend their retirement funds now. I don't know if I could have fought this war alone, therefore I'm thankful for their support. Update 3. Last Monday, the legal case came to a close. When all of the court records and evidence were provided to Robert anonymously, Penelope's scheme fell apart. He attended the last hearing and discovered the whole truth about Penelope's history and current behavior. The judge examined all of the evidence for 4 hours. The text messages revealing Penelope's scheme to claim the trust fund funds piqued her curiosity the most. In addition, Penelope's hired private investigator testified that she had paid him to follow us months before she even tried to get in touch with Emily. During his testimony, Robert described how Penelope had deceived him and his family for 2 years. He disclosed that, on the grounds that she wants to adopt underprivileged children in the future, Penelope had pushed him to amend the terms of his mother's trust fund to include adopted children. Penelope began her scheme to reclaim custody of Emily after his mother refused. The judge's decision was unambiguous. She gave me a permanent restraining order and dismissed Penelope's custody petition. Penelope cannot approach Emily, me, our house, or Emily's school within 1,000 feet. Additionally, she is prohibited from mailing messages or packages, even via intermediaries. Any infraction will result in an arrest right away. Robert informed me following the hearing that he had already sought full custody of their son and filed for divorce. He discovered proof that Penelope had been financing her custody dispute with funds and resources from his business. She had paid the private investigator and attorneys more than $330,000 of their combined savings. When her manager discovered that Penelope had been using company time and computers to monitor us and plot her custody battle, she lost her job at the investment firm where she was employed. Her parents decided to take her in only after she began intense therapy, so she returned to Florida to live with them. About 30 minutes away from our previous home, we moved to a new one. Although it's in a different school district, my office is really closer to it. Last month, Emily began attending her new school. The principal is fully aware of our predicament and the school has outstanding security precautions. In her class, Emily has already met 3 new pals. I was able to explain everything to Emily in an age-appropriate manner with the assistance of the child psychologist. She picked me to be her father when we informed her that Penelope, her original mother, was unable to care for her. I was finally able to reassure Emily that no one would ever take her away when she questioned whether Penelope would take her away. Although Emily still occasionally sleeps in my room, the nightmares have largely ended. Her new teacher reports that she is adjusting well and that she is once again being her happy self at school. To make her feel more at ease in the new home, she sketched a portrait of our family last week, which only included her, me and our acquired pooch Max. Emily continues to get birthday and Christmas gifts from Penelope's parents. They just ever email me to see how she's doing and respect our boundaries. They have always been supportive of my adoption of Emily, so I send them pictures and updates every few months. I had to pay almost $40,000 in legal expenses for the entire thing, but it was well worth it to keep Emily safe. Last month, I received a promotion from my company, which aids in the financial recuperation. More significantly, we may now enjoy our lives without worrying about what others are doing. We are grateful to everyone who helped us get through this. No one can ever again question that Emily is my daughter in any meaningful manner. We're together, content and secure. That is all that is important. Family and fiancé pressured me to reconcile with my dad, who left for his new family, but I refuse. Now I'm left feeling isolated. When I was 13, my father had an affair, left my mother and moved in with his affair partner, whom we will call Janet. My sister and I used to see him every weekend, and I have to confess that he was a decent father, but I never liked Janet. When Janet became pregnant and they had a son, our visits became less frequent, and my father became more worried about his new family. He missed some of my performances and my sister's competitions because he was preoccupied with his son. Janet chose to relocate when I was 16 years old in search of a better job. My sister and I begged him not to leave, but Dad simply responded, "I need to prioritize my family." He moved 10 hours away, which effectively destroyed our relationship. I decided to maintain no contact because it was evident he did not consider me family. My younger sister remained in contact with him. He would try to call and invite me to visit my sister, but I refused. When he returned to see my sister, I refused to talk to him when he arrived at the house. I did not invite him to my high school or college graduation. I'm now 33 and have had no touch with him. He has tried to contact me several times over the years, and his family has reached out on his behalf. I've avoided family gatherings in case he attends, such as my sister's wedding and baby showers. My father and his family returned to our hometown 3 months ago, and he has been tireless in his efforts to reconcile. My half-brother and sister have both expressed interest in a relationship with him, stating that he is an excellent father. My father found out I'm getting married and has been attempting to contact me, even speaking with my fiancée. Janet messaged me, stating I had continually broken my father's heart, that I am sad, and that I should get therapy. I reacted, calling her a expletive, and then blocked her. Everyone seems to be urging me to accept him back into my life. I'm weary of being harassed and unintentionally running into my father and his family in town. Whenever I see them, I simply walk away and refuse to speak. People keep telling me he's a decent father who did his best to stay in touch, but I pushed him away. The pressure is immense. My mother, sister, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and even some friends all insist that I reconcile. Even my fiancé has begun to question my decision to exclude him. Update 1. I recently chatted with my fiancé and regrettably things didn't go well. I've had enough and want to run away. My fiancé, whom I will refer to as Larry, is aware of my background with my father and Janet. I stated that his siding with my father and pressing me was harming me, and that as my fiancé, he should be supporting me. Larry informed me that he cannot support me in doing anything that he believes is bad. He said he spoke with my father, heard all sides of the story, and believes we can resolve things if we sit down and chat. I told Larry I didn't want to communicate with my father and asked why he was talking to him. Larry revealed that his father, who is acquainted with my father, pushed him to contact him. He then informed me that my father adores me and has always wanted to be a part of my life. He even has images of me, which I believe he obtained from family because my social media is private. Larry stated that my father is heartbroken over our estrangement and that I was unfair in asking him to move away when I was young. He also claimed that I started off on the wrong foot with Janet and that I was not to blame for the relationship's failure. Finally, he informed me that everyone can see the truth except me, and that I should look in the mirror since I am the problem. Needless to say, I burst out crying and asked him why he was doing this to me and not supporting me. Larry claims to love me, but he won't stand by and let me be a cruel expletive. After he said this, I stood up, told him that he shouldn't marry a cruel expletive, and left. I am currently sitting in my car and my phone is blowing up with Larry attempting to call me, but I do not want to speak with him. I feel as if I'm losing everything and everyone, and I have no idea what's happening. Update 2. I know many of you are encouraging me to break off all contact with my family and leave town, but it is not an option for me financially. I wouldn't be able to start my business somewhere because I've invested all of my money in it and have only recently generated a consistent revenue. Relocating is not viable. I adore my friends and family and don't want to cut them off. I grew up in this town, and I'm not ready to leave. I did not intend to write another report so quickly, but a lot has transpired today. First, I agreed to meet with my father to discuss and persuade him to back off and leave me alone. I requested my mother to arrange it for him and no one else. I wasn't sure he'd agree, but within 15 minutes of her calling, he was at the door. I requested my mother to stay and mediate. To paraphrase the talk, my father is in therapy and invites me to join him for family sessions. He wants me to spend one-on-one time with him, to stop being harsh and mean to his children, and to believe in them. He also demanded that I stop trash-talking Janet and invite him and his family to my wedding, including asking him to walk me down the aisle. I, on the other hand, want him to quit talking to my friends and asking others to speak for him. I want him to keep Janet away from me totally, and I agreed to be courteous at events and around town as long as he does not try to hug or chat to me. My mother reminded him that he was being unrealistic about some of his desires, particularly those involving Janet and his other children. For the time being, we've agreed that I'll attend 3 therapy sessions with him as he schedules them. My mother also believes I require individual therapy. He will cease interfering with my life and relationships, keep Janet away from me and ask his children to give me room. I will be courteous with him in public as long as he respects my personal space and does not approach or press me. I still haven't spoken to my fiancé. He arrived at my mother's house, but she refused to let him inside. He keeps blowing up my phone, as do his family and friends, and telling me to listen to him. During my meeting with my father, I discovered that he had paid for the majority of the vendors and services for my impending wedding, and they have been on speaking terms for far longer than I had anticipated. Larry had told me that his family paid for these items and I believed him. I feel betrayed by him, and I no longer trust him. I know I'll have to talk to him someday, but I don't feel ready yet. Update 3. First and foremost, the contract with my father is off the table. He couldn't even go a week without crossing my limits, thus there will be no therapy sessions with him, and I will maintain no contact. After deciding on a course of action, keeping Janet away from me, asking his kids to back off, and respecting my personal space, it only lasted 3 days. Everyone looked pleased that I had forgiven my father and told me so. My sister was thrilled that I was willing to give him a chance, and under duress, I agreed to have dinner with just her and my father. When my sister and I arrived at the restaurant to meet our father, he wasn't alone. He had invited Janet, my grandparents, his son, and daughter. He stood up and attempted to hug me. I immediately grew agitated, wondering why they were there. My father informed me that if we wanted to mend our relationship, I needed to embrace Janet and my younger siblings. I tried to leave after telling him that he had broken our agreement and that he should never contact me again. He wouldn't let me go and took hold of me. When I say all hell broke loose, I really mean it. I began shouting at them, and my father, Janet, and grandparents attempted to gaslight me and persuade me to sit down. When that didn't work, things became heated, resulting in a shouting battle. My father and Janet said many horrible things, including comments about my appearance and dubbing me a psychopath. My half-brother left the restaurant and my half-sister began to cry. My sister astonished me by defending me and accusing my father of wrecking things after I had finally given him a chance. She even slapped Janet. My sister took me out of there and apologized to me. I believe this was the first time she had witnessed Janet's interactions with me and how she handled me. She kept repeating she couldn't understand how Dad had spent years professing he would do anything to get me back, only to sabotage the relationship when he finally had the opportunity to re-establish it. My father has tried to contact me, but I have blocked him and refused to speak to him. I also refuse to speak with my grandparents. My father has tried to get my mother and sister to talk with me, but I believe he has burned his bridges with them. The conflict in the restaurant has spread and some people appear to be backing off. As I already stated, what my father and Janet said to me was inexcusable, and because we live in a tiny town, it spread quickly. Hopefully, individuals will back down, and those that continue to support them will be forced out of my life. My sister is very unhappy with my father and Janet and she refuses to speak to them. She blames them for my continued lack of communication. She is not allowing them to see her children either. I'm not sure if my sister will reconcile, but she is furious right now. My mother is also furious, and she appears to have had a few choice words with my father and Janet. She has agreed not to force me again to communicate with him. I'm going to start individual treatment since I believe I really need it. I feel awful for my half-siblings because they have done nothing wrong. I may be willing to have a distant relationship with them in the future, but I'm not ready yet, and I'm not sure I ever will be. I did send them a note on Facebook to apologize and assure them that they had not done anything wrong. Finally, to inform you all on my fiancé. I chatted with him yesterday about everything. I'd been radio silent since walking out on him. Essentially, he was pressured by his father to speak with my father and was offered a sob story about a misunderstood parent who really wanted to be involved in his daughter's life. Larry was unhappy with me for refusing to attend his family functions and for leaving his mother's birthday party when I realized my father and Janet were present. He was under pressure from his family to not disrupt their activities, and all he wanted was for everyone to be happy and get along, clearly at my price. Larry said that my father had paid for some of the wedding suppliers, but he didn't realize it until after the event was over. His father had informed Larry that he and his mother had paid for everything. My father had informed Larry that it was his way of giving. Larry also revealed that my father had instructed him to speak to me on his behalf. I informed Larry that he had abused my confidence and I couldn't imagine marrying someone who didn't support me. He came down in tears and apologized to me, promising never to do it again. Larry was upset and asked for another opportunity. To all of you who expected me to end our relationship, I apologize for disappointing you, but we will try to work things out. Aside from this incident, he has been the ideal partner, and I sincerely believe he was duped by his family and my father. Larry has sworn to stand up to his family and have no contact with my father. I'm still living with my mother because I need space, which I won't have if I move back home. We will contact our wedding vendors next week to discuss our alternatives. Larry begs for a postponement rather than canceling the wedding completely. We may still break up because actions speak louder than words, and I want to see if he can rebuild what we had and demonstrate that I can trust and rely on him. My father has been attempting to reach me, but I've blocked him. Larry has sworn to stand up to his family and have no contact with my father. There's no point in changing my phone number because I've done it before and my father always gets to acquire it again. Larry is open to the possibility of ending their relationship. I'm giving him an opportunity to show me that he means what he says. I always felt I had a good relationship with Larry's family, but I was definitely mistaken. I'm not asking him to have no contact with them, that is up to him, but I will absolutely separate myself from them. Any additional occurrences will result in no contact. If we are still together and have children, I will not trust his family with them. Update 4. I've cancelled the wedding. I was able to receive some returns, but I lost some money. Larry begged me not to cancel the wedding, but I couldn't marry him after what he'd done. I was determined to give him another chance, and he promised me he would maintain low contact and stand up to his parents, issuing an ultimatum that we would not allow any communication with my father and Janet. He agreed that we would not attend any gathering or party to which they were invited, and that we would not allow any attempts to force contact with my father. Larry met with his family to explain the situation, but when he returned from the discussion, he was agitated and appeared to have changed his mind. He tried to persuade me that his family only meant good and that he couldn't avoid touch with them because he loves them. He also stated that he couldn't control their friendships and tried to reassure me that it wouldn't be an issue in the future. He claimed his father would speak with my father and ensure he acted appropriately in my presence. As soon as I heard this, I started thinking about the remarks I'd read. The primary one is that if we had children, Larry might take them to his family, which includes my father and Janet, and I would have no control over it. At that point, I understood I couldn't trust Larry and would never be able to. I broke up with him. Larry isn't taking it well and constantly begging me to accept him back, swearing he won't contact his family. His family and friends are pleading with me not to stop the relationship, but he has made his decision and demonstrated to me that he lacks courage. I do not need him in my life. In reference to my father, I am considering obtaining a restraining order. Given what transpired at the restaurant, I may be able to, but I'm not sure yet. My acquaintance is assisting me in investigating the matter. My father has kept a low profile since last week, with the exception of a few attempts to apologize, and I haven't heard anything from him. My sister still refuses to speak with my father or Janet. Unlike me, my sister is very confrontational and has attacked them on social media about what happened at the restaurant and other earlier events that I was unaware of. When my sister and Janet ran into each other in town, they had a very public yelling match, with Janet demanding that my sister remove her posts. It concluded with Janet assaulting my sister. My father reportedly sided with Janet in this, and now my sister despises Janet and refuses to speak with our father, who is also attempting to reach her. My father's and Janet's reputation appears to have suffered as a result of the restaurant event, my sister's battle with Janet, and several Facebook posts about them. Individuals are gossiping, which has worked well for me since some individuals have backed down, which I am pleased about. Unfortunately, a few people continue to support him, including my ex's parents. There hasn't been much news about my half-siblings recently. I've located a therapist, but there's a bit of a waiting list before I can begin therapy. I'm still living with my mother, who is completely supportive, and I've found a cat that I'll pick up next week. Update 5. I'm still at my mother's house and I've got my tiny kitten. I named her Sasha, and she is the loveliest thing, yet quite lively. I'll try to take pictures for people who request them, but she won't stay still long enough for a decent shot. I already love her, and my mother continues to be my rock. I'm still waiting for treatment, but I'm finding Reddit beneficial and therapeutic, and the majority of the people here have been quite kind and helped me see things more clearly. So many thanks to everyone. As for my ex, Now that we've split up, I feel lighter and more free. Being away from him has made me realize all of the red lights in our relationship that I was previously unaware of, and I feel like I escaped unharmed. Luke, who is using real names because my blogs were discovered, is not dealing well with the separation and has taken over my father's role in continually disturbing me. If you read this, Luke, we're done, and I won't change my mind. So stop phoning me, coming to my house, or sending me flowers. I'm moving on, and you should too. My sister, Emma, is still on my side and has moved on from Janet, the step-monster. My sister informed everyone about Janet's affairs and they are no longer communicating. Janet is still trying to preserve face, claiming my sister is lying and telling everyone that we are the worst and have treated her terribly throughout the years, attempting to ruin her marriage. I don't think anyone believes what she is saying. Janet has sent hateful mails to both myself and my sister. When we ran into her, she yelled at us and threatened us. My sister's car has been keyed and my store windows have been broken. Unfortunately, we can't prove anything, but she's the most likely suspect. My half-siblings are undoubtedly my father's children. They were tested years ago when she was a baby. According to what I've heard, they're not speaking with Janet at all. My father seemed to have grown a spine and kicked Janet out. She is currently living with her parents, according to what I've heard, and he is considering divorce. I haven't spoken with my father since he apologized for everything in a text message. Regarding a restraining order, I'm more concerned with obtaining one against Janet at this time. I have cameras, but you can't tell if it's her due to the angle. I'm getting fitted for better covering. The damage is already done. My father had a chance to make things right with me, but he squandered it. I just want to be alone and get on with my life. Update 6. My father and Janet are still together. They split up for a period but are now back together and maintaining a united face, despite the fact that she is a cheater. Apparently, they tried again for the sake of their children. Strangely enough, my father and I are in a better place. We text periodically and are friendly when we see each other. He has ceased pushing for a relationship and is now respecting my space. We can now be in the same room without generating a commotion, and we've even had the occasional coffee together, which to be honest, is all I ever wanted. He even provided me with my education fund without any restrictions attached. My step-siblings and I have begun to communicate and follow each other on social media. My stepsister occasionally comes to my workplace to assist. I knew they were not to blame, and I was being unjust to them. They are still furious with their mother, but they have to live with her. They're giving her the quiet treatment, as far as I can tell. I still despise Janet, but at least she isn't bothering me. Unfortunately, I was unable to obtain a restraining order against her owing to a lack of proof. I avoid and do not speak to her, and I believe my father has warned her. My sister is conversing with our father again, but she despises Janet and would not have anything to do with her. She goes out of her way to exclude Janet from everything she can, and my sister and I have become closer. As for Larry, we are not and will never be back together. He hasn't entirely accepted it, but things have settled down and I'm no longer hounded as much. He still wants to get back together, but I am not interested. His friends and family will come to accept this. He believes that because things are better between my father and me, I would soften and forgive him, but I can't trust him. As for me, I've started treatment and am working through my issues. I've recognized that my relationship with my father was not entirely his fault, and I share some of the guilt. I spent my life behaving as if he had abandoned me while in reality I had pushed him away. My business is doing great, so I'm just focused on myself right now. My brother stole my girlfriend and framed me. Now, 6 years later, they're all begging for forgiveness. I, 24M, feel as though the ones who were meant to love me the most have ripped my life apart. I'm still having trouble accepting that this all began 6 years ago. I had been dating Emily, 24F, since high school. We grew up with our parents, who were childhood friends, and our families were quite close. I believed that I would eventually wed her. We had acquaintances, attended the same schools, and even took family trips together. I genuinely thought we would be together forever because she was my first love. Alex, 28M, my older brother, comes next. He has always been my parents' favorite child, smart, gregarious, and successful. Before everything broke apart, I didn't think it would matter. Emily accused me of sexually assaulting her 6 years ago. I was caught off guard. Why would she say something like that when we had been together for years? It was unbelievable to me. Alex intervened and supported her, which made everything worse. He claimed to have been protecting her when he told our parents that he had witnessed me acting improperly toward her at a party. My parents immediately accepted his story. My side of the story wasn't even requested. They had complete faith in Emily and Alex. The entire community turned against me and I was expelled from the house in a matter of days. I had considered Emily's family to be a second family, but they also severed all connections. My reputation, my family, and my girlfriend were all lost. My parents informed me that unless I received assistance for something I hadn't even done, they would not want to see me again. I had nowhere to go at the age of 18. In the end, I crashed at a friend's house, but I was devastated on an emotional level. I resorted to drunkenness and melancholy, doing everything to dull the hurt of being dumped and wrongly accused by the people I trusted most. I had a hard time moving on for years. I started going to treatment, moved to a new city and gradually started to restore my life. But I was still troubled by the treachery. I was so afraid that others would be unfaithful to me like Emily and Alex that dating was practically impossible. I never made an effort to get in touch with my family, and they never did. They expelled me on false pretenses, and I couldn't forgive them for it. Then everything changed around 6 months ago. Lisa, an old friend of Emily's, contacted me. She informed me she had to confess something because she could no longer bear the guilt. Lisa disclosed that while we were still together, Emily and Alex had been seeing one other behind my back. They had been in love for years. They made up the fake accusation to get me out of the picture when Emily decided to leave me for Alex. Alex was confident that my parents would believe him, and it was successful. After I got kicked out, Emily and Alex started dating. They are now married and appear to be leading a beautiful life, while I was left to deal with the fallout. Lisa went to my parents after being honest with me. She wanted them to know that they had thrown away their son for a lie because she could no longer bear to know the reality. My folks were surprised. Lisa clarified how Alex had deceived Emily and how they had both made me the victim. Soon after, my parents contacted me and begged to meet and speak. They were inconsolable, sobbing over the phone as they apologized for not trusting me. They acknowledged that their love for Emily and their faith in Alex had caused them to become blinded. Initially, I was angry instead of feeling satisfied that I had finally been proven right. They wanted to make things right as if nothing had happened, even if it took them 6 years to discover the truth. The worst thing? Alex and Emily are forgiven. According to my parents, family is family, and what's done is done. They have even let Emily back into their lives and still adore Alex. They now want us all to make amends, move on from the past, and pretend that I wasn't destroyed by the previous 6 years. Their most recent attempts to contact me have gone unanswered. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to forgive them for their actions. Because Alex and Emily are family, they expect me to simply get over it, after throwing me out on false pretenses and leaving me when I most needed them. So, even after my family learned the truth, am I the fool for severing our relationship? Relevant comments. Telling them that you don't want to be a part of their life as long as they continue to have Alex and Emily in them is quite reasonable. They ought to hold Alex and Emily accountable and disown them if they genuinely regret their actions. That makes perfect sense. Definitely not a fool. I don't think I would want them back either, given the harm done in the 6 years it took to find out. The golden child will always be preferred by parents like them. It required a bystander to come forward and expose this horrible plot 6 years after the OP lost all ties to his former life. I would really consider bringing a slander lawsuit against OP's brother and his ex because they are all terrible people. The members of your family wish to ignore this. They ought to have invested the same amount of effort in repairing your reputation and severing your connections with Emily and Alex. Going back to this familial dynamic would only make things worse for you. Moving on with your life and avoiding further pain is the wisest course of action. Update. Hello to everybody. I've read all of the suggestions and remarks made by others. I want to start by saying thank you so much for your support, which truly helped me put things in perspective. Since I tend to act rashly, I spoke with my therapist and close friends following this incident and made a decision. I've made the decision that neither Emily nor Alex will face legal action from me, nor will I pursue retribution of any kind. I simply want this to end after everything I've been through. They and my family are not worth any more of my energy. I need to move on because dragging this through the legal system for slander or defamation will simply make me feel more bound to the past. It became evident to me after speaking with my therapist that retaining the anger was only making me feel worse. I choose not to allow this to rekindle old scars since I've spent so many years starting over in my life, through therapy, overcoming my alcoholism, landing a job I enjoy and developing a new network of genuine friends. I decided to let my family know that I don't want to communicate with them. I clarified that I have no interest in reliving the past or acting as though things could return to as they were. I wished them well and expressed my hope that they would be able to move on without me. I then blocked their phone numbers. Alex and Emily purchased burner phones with new numbers to call me for a few hours, but I haven't returned any of their calls. Their insistence on apologizing and reassembling the family only after everyone else has discovered what they truly did enrages me. Some may argue that I ought to have put up a stronger fight or held them accountable, but I'm done. I no longer require their approval or an apology. I have decided to permanently close this chapter. Positively, news of Emily and Alex's actions spread throughout the community. Since I was raised in a tiny town, I suppose word got around fast. My parents have been publicly humiliated, and people are now boycotting Alex's company. To get away from the city, Emily's parents and I are considering relocating to the country. I am aware of this because I am constantly receiving messages about how my activities are impacting others, which is, to be honest, rather crazy. Nevertheless, I am somewhat proud that they aren't getting away with it. A few others also wanted to know how I made ends meet. This occurred after I'd graduated from high school. With student loans, I was able to enroll in a comparatively good college because of my respectable grades. Before I landed a job in my profession, I worked at a few odd jobs. Although it's a starting salary, it's better than what I had previously. Since I was able to live with friends after college, I must admit that, in spite of my enormous student loan debt, I'm very content with my life given everything I've gone through. I also wanted to address the claims made by some that this was a hoax because of my previous posts. It is a joint account between myself and my pals. We may have come together because we have all experienced trauma and difficult family issues. However, I would like to thank everyone for their support and guidance. 6 years have passed, and it still seems unbelievable that I could have experienced any of this. I felt more confident to take the necessary action after reading your advice. Thank you. I'm hoping that this will allow me to go forward without turning around. Husband wet the bed, threw a tantrum, and is now refusing to speak to me after I told our daughter the truth. I'm feeling confused and isolated. This morning, I, 28F, woke up because the sheets I was sleeping on were damp. I believed our 6-year-old daughter had been in an accident, but to my amazement, it was not her. My husband had wet the bed. After showering, I woke him up and informed him what had happened. He initially denied it, but eventually acknowledged he had peed the bed. He sprang out of bed, horrified, and began ripping off the blankets. Because our kid was still asleep on the opposite side, he couldn't get them off, which I found amusing. He became angry and told me it wasn't amusing, so I stopped. The only thing his yanking off the sheets did was wake up our daughter, who was perplexed and inquired what was going on. He didn't say anything and kept fumbling with the sheets. When he didn't respond, I informed her that he had wet the bed. He froze and gave me an odd expression, like if he was about to cry or something. Our daughter inquired why he had soiled the bed, and because he was still silent, I calmly explained that accidents do happen. He just stood there, staring at me with a lethal expression. I am not exaggerating when I say he looked at me with utter hatred. I've never been terrified of him, but for a moment, I thought he was going to hit me. Then he dropped the bedding on the floor, exited the room and locked himself in the bathroom for nearly 45 minutes. When he came out, he quickly changed and went, saying, "You can take her to school." He did not even look at me. I was annoyed by his behavior, but I let it go since I didn't want to dispute with him when he was in such a foul attitude. However, when I returned home from work, he was still brooding and ignored me. I was still annoyed by his conduct, so I told him to get over it. That wetting the bed wasn't the end of the world, and stop taking it out on me. At this point, he accused me of humiliating him in front of our daughter. I thought that claim completely ludicrous on so many levels, so I furiously reminded him that he disgraced himself by wetting the bed, not I. He did not take it well, shouted at me and walked off to his computer. Now he won't talk to me, and I'm bewildered. I believe he was the one who acted inappropriately and immaturely, and I do not believe I did anything wrong. Maybe my last comment was harsh, but I believe he deserved it. Still, I'm wondering if I was too mean. Edit 1. I simply wanted to clarify that I did not advise our daughter to be mean or disgrace my husband. I informed her since I didn't know what else to say and it was very evident what had occurred. I felt it was best to be honest. I didn't say it in a humiliating way, but rather casually and without making a huge issue about it. I didn't expect my hubby to feel this horrible about it. Edit 2. For whatever reason, someone shared a link to a claim about my husband having cancer, which is false. Neither my husband nor I have cancer. Update 1. I reviewed my original post and realized that I needed to elaborate before providing an update. I felt empathy and cared for my hubby. I spoke gently to him after waking him up. However, His reaction caught me off guard, and it couldn't have taken more than a minute for him to hop out of bed and lock himself in the bathroom. After that, I thought it was best to leave him alone. I realize I was wrong for informing our child, but I didn't do it to be mean or embarrass him. It was a stupid and terrible decision, and I regret it. Furthermore, it is difficult to show someone you care while they are being neglected. I contacted him after he left to see if he was okay, but he left it as read. I inquired again when I came home, but there was still no response. I asked if we could discuss it. Again, no reaction. I asked if he could explain why he was so angry with me, but he didn't say anything. I gave up and went to prepare dinner. After supper, I implored him to quit ignoring me. No response. When I inquired if he wanted me to leave, he said, "You can stay, I don't care." So I asked him again whether he'd stop ignoring me if I stayed, and when he answered no, I was done. While I don't think it's fair to ignore someone like that, I know I handled it horribly, and I feel terrible for being so nasty to him. Anyway, I texted him early this morning to apologize and to see if he was available to talk after work. Around midday he texted me okay. We met at home, and he was obviously cool and spoke little. I apologized for everything, for laughing, for informing our child, for asking him to get over it, and for the most shameful part, telling him he disgraced himself. He remained silent the entire time, and after I finished, he just questioned why I had told our child. I explained, and then we sat in silence for what seemed like eternity. Then unexpectedly, he said, "I scared you, right?" I told him that short, and he did. He claimed he could feel it. I inquired what caused him to react so aggressively, but he didn't know. He simply said he panicked when he realized he had soiled the bed, and it grew worse when I told our child. He stated he was furious with me for it. I apologize again for making him feel this way, and he apologized for scaring me. I'm not going to go over everything we said after that. It was a long conversation. To summarize, neither of us is pleased with how we behaved, and we both apologized for it. He wasn't as outraged as I had assumed about my laughter, but we agreed I shouldn't have informed our child. However, he is no longer upset about it and does not consider it to be a significant concern anymore. We both agreed that he shouldn't have neglected me in that manner, and I handled it horribly and harshly. We have accepted each other's apologies, but I still feel guilty about being so rude to him. Update 2. To begin with, because there were questions regarding why my husband peed the bed while sober, I attempted to persuade him to see a doctor after so many of you suggested it. But he flatly refused, stating it was meaningless because they would do nothing regardless. He's wet the bed once before, and both times he was weary and stressed out. So that could have been the cause. I'm not sure. This is becoming long, so if you simply want to read about my spouse divorcing me, you can stop right now. My second post was composed shortly after I had apologized. Based on the initial replies to my first post, I assumed that I must be a bad person and felt sorry for him. But to be honest, I never thought my original actions were particularly awful, and I still don't. That is not to say that I did not deserve some of the hate I received. I certainly did, but some of it was simply filthy, and some of the things I was reviled for never occurred, save in the minds of commenters. I felt terrible since the effect of my actions was so dreadful, despite the fact that I had no intention of hurting him. So the apology was genuine, and by the time of the second post, I was relieved we were on speaking terms and hoped we could put this behind us. It turned out that I couldn't. Shortly after, I realized I was still concerned by his actions. I also began to receive more remarks from people who noticed problems with his behavior, which I appreciate because it confirmed to me that it was most likely serious. What I purposefully left out of my first post in order to get unbiased feedback was the fact that my hubby can be unstable at times. He can be immature and sensitive, struggles to regulate his emotions, particularly rage, and is sometimes difficult to understand. It's probably due to mental health concerns, which isn't fair to him, and I feel terrible about it. But sometimes I just find him annoying and exhausting. I guess I was called out for it in my first post. He'd been in contact with a mental health team for years, but if they hadn't prescribed his prescriptions, he would have stopped seeing them long ago. Anyway, I was getting weary of constantly catering to his mood swings and failing to confront his concerns. So his exaggerated and, in my mind, threatening reaction to our child peeing the bed and me notifying him felt like too much, even though I knew he was hurt. As I mentioned, I had never been intimidated by him before, so it bothered me, even though he did nothing. I tried to talk to him about what happened again, particularly why he became so angry that I felt intimidated. I even questioned him whether it had anything to do with him peeing the bed as a child, based on some suggestions in the comments about him being shamed for it. He simply stated that it did not, and it was evident that he did not want to discuss any of it, so I did not press. He's tough to talk to about feelings or relationship concerns, which may be really irritating for me. To be honest, I had some reservations about staying in this marriage, but they were not severe at the moment. Then around a week before Christmas, he made an unexpected suicide attempt, which was unfortunately not his first. I didn't see it coming and I still feel terrible about it, probably always will. His recall of the preceding hours is hazy, but he insists that he did not mean to harm himself when he left our house that night. But I should have known. It was bad, and we didn't know if he'd make it or in what condition. Fortunately, he lived, but with no long-term consequences. The aftermath was terrible, and when he returned home, he was really ill, lethargic for weeks. The quick answer to why he did it is that he obviously had an excessive amount of anxiety that he wanted to escape, along with his occasional complete lack of impulse control. He made it obvious that it had nothing to do with anything I had done. I had no idea how horrible he was feeling because he did not inform me or anyone else. It's very difficult to help him when he won't tell us how he feels. It terrified me, and it scared him as well, to the point where he knew he needed more support. He's taken it more seriously than he ever has before. When he was offered therapy, he accepted. Now that the wait time is ludicrous, he will begin in October. In the interim, he has been visiting a nurse and a psychiatrist. By April, he was back to normal and he returned to work in early May. Then we discovered I was pregnant. It was unintentional and the result of a birth control error on our part. Despite all of the obvious reasons why we should have terminated the pregnancy, we chose to continue with it. We didn't take this decision lightly, but it was what we wanted. I should mention that he was a complete mess throughout my first pregnancy, and the second, we have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, was equally difficult for him. But for some reason that escapes me now, we expected things to be different this time around. And it was for a time. At 12 weeks, we discovered that there were actually 2 babies. I know it's bad, but I'd be lying if I said we were delighted about it at first. However, by that time, we had already decided to have a baby, so we both agreed to proceed with it. After digesting the news, we became quite enthused about it. I'm 23 weeks pregnant and things had been going well until yesterday. When he arrived home from work, he was unhappy. I assumed he had a hard day at work, but when I questioned about it, he responded with an angry diatribe about how dumb we were for having the babies and how we should have terminated them. I was stunned, and when I asked why he was saying that and pointed out that it wasn't a good thing to say, he just said, "Well, you asked, and it's what I feel." I didn't want to talk to him while he was like that, so I told him we'd talk later, when the kids were asleep. When they were done, I asked him what it was all about and where it came from. He said he didn't know, like he does when he doesn't want to discuss something. I tried to push a little but went nowhere. I was frustrated and told him it wasn't fair to say such things and then refused to discuss them. He remained silent for a long time before saying, "Expletive this," and locking himself in the restroom. When he came out, he appeared depressed. I inquired whether he was all right, and he indicated he needed some air. I assured him it was all right to feel sad. However, he objected and vehemently stated that he was not sad. I know I should have let him go, but I had a horrible feeling. I requested him to remain, but he didn't like it and screamed that he didn't want to expletive stay, before slamming the door so violently that the kids woke up. After he departed, all I could do was tend to the children, pretend everything was well and hope he returned safely. I was very worried. When the kids fell back asleep, I contacted him to see if he was okay, and then I cried. He responded almost immediately with, "I'm okay. I'll be home at 5, sorry. I love you." Which relieved some of my anxiety, but I remained unhappy and angry. He returned shortly afterwards, definitely high but calmer. He is not addicted but he does use it occasionally. When he noticed I was crying, he apologized. I told him I wasn't good with him treating me that way, and we had the same talk we'd had before. Him apologizing and me explaining how hurt I was. At that point, I realized I wasn't even angry anymore, though I probably should have been. I simply asked him not to run away like that again. He said he wouldn't, but deep down I know he will. We went to bed after that, but I was unable to sleep. To be honest, I haven't felt fantastic today. I'm terrified, disappointed and feel extremely dumb. When my husband arrived home today, he was in a better mood. He was such a sweetheart. He even spoke to me. He apologized for yesterday and expressed disappointment in himself for his actions. He stated he's been working so hard to act like a normal person, his words, and is weary of failing all the time. I know he's trying and doesn't always fail, so I advised him not to be too hard on himself. I asked how he was feeling, and he replied that he wasn't feeling well, but he couldn't clarify. When I inquired how horrible not well was, he stated it wasn't too bad and I shouldn't worry. He promised to let me know if things grew worse, but I'm not sure I can trust him. I'm terrified he'll crash again, and I'm not sure I have the energy for it right now. I am quite sure he doesn't either. I really hope that treatment will benefit him, but I'm not sure what we can realistically anticipate from it. What if it doesn't make any difference? What should we do then? I know my posts have primarily focused on the negative, so it may not appear that way, but I adore my hubby. I don't want to live without him, but I also don't want to live this way. I'm not sure, maybe I'm just excessively sensitive right now, being pregnant and all. Boss reprimanded me for not answering an email in 4 minutes. Now I'm wondering if I should quit due to her unreasonable demands. I've been at my new job for just over a month and have very grave doubts about whether it's going to work out. I'm finding it impossible to make my supervisor, Martha, happy. Her criticism is frequent, harsh and in my opinion, often very unreasonable. The incident that has me writing to you happened today, when she reprimanded me in writing for failing to answer an email in 4 minutes. To set the scene. Earlier this week, Martha and my other boss, I support 2 teams but it's an uneven split. Unfortunately, my primary boss is the awful one, had a meeting with me in which Martha told me all the things I was doing wrong and what needed to change. I'm trying to understand where she's coming from, but I'm just not used to a work situation like this. She proudly describes herself as a micromanager. She doesn't appear to know the word has a negative connotation. And is looking for constant immediate responsiveness, over-communication, her words, and accountability. I understand she's the boss and it's her call, but it's a hard adjustment. I'm not used to being watched so closely. Every job I've had, the boss has been concerned with results, not with knowing exactly where I am every minute, hearing back from me instantly, etc. All week, I've worked so hard to keep her happy and show her that I took the conversation to heart. Then today, I received an email, in which Martha was CC'd, from a senior partner asking for contact info for one of our clients. I saw the email come in while I was working on a project for the other boss. I made the apparently grave error of not stopping instantly, but instead finished up the line in the Excel sheet I was working on, then opened the email and began gathering the requested info. Before I had finished, Martha replied to both of us, sending the partner the requested information, the wrong information for the record, but I'll get to that later. I saw her email, which arrived in my inbox a whopping 4 minutes after the email from the partner, stopped working on my response since it was no longer necessary, and went back to the project I'd been working on. Then I get an email from Martha. Jane, this would have been a great opportunity to build a relationship with the partner. Why didn't you dive in and assist? 4 minutes, Allison. 4 minutes. A bathroom break can take 4 minutes. I just feel like she's determined to hate me. I tried so hard all week to do everything exactly the way she likes, and she still found something to criticize. If she wanted me to answer the email, why didn't she give me a grace period of, maybe 5 minutes before answering it herself? Also, as I said earlier, she gave him the wrong information. He asked for the email address and she gave the physical address, which to me seems like she was so eager to answer the email, so that she could blame me for not answering it, that she rushed and sent the wrong info. By the way, if I sent incorrect information to a partner, she would act like it was the end of the world. But it's no big deal when she does it. Also, for the record, I understand some things are very time sensitive. I still think 4 minutes is kind of a stretch, for almost any situation, but I also want to make it clear. This was not an urgent request. It could have waited 5, maybe even, 10 minutes. I'm not asking whether my boss is being reasonable here. I'm very confident that she isn't. My question to you is, do you think I should start looking for a new job? I just feel like this is such an unreasonable criticism that there's no way I'm ever going to make this person happy. She either has no idea how to manage people or has developed an instantaneous hatred for me and will continue to find things to criticize no matter how hard I try. I've been so stressed out since I started this job, worrying about messing up, which not surprisingly, is probably leading me to mess up more. Is this salvageable or should I start looking for an escape plan? Update. Your response was really helpful. Martha had already fucked with my head so much that she really had me doubting myself. So much so that I honestly thought you might take her side and ask me, but why did it take you 4 whole minutes to answer the email? So for you in the commenters to reassure me that yes, she was being unreasonable was really helpful. As for an update. Reader, she fired me. Yes, I took your advice and started looking for a new job. She fired me before I could find one. The 4-minute email happened about a month after I started and I got fired just under the 3-month mark. The reason given was that I was making too many mistakes and that they couldn't trust me with my assignments. I'm curious how it's going with my replacement. If things like accidentally saving a draft to the wrong folder, in your first month at a new job, qualify as fireable offenses. I mess up sometimes, more than I normally do. But I think it's because of how Martha treated me. She was so volatile that I didn't feel comfortable asking questions, and she also would just disappear fairly often. She can disappear for 3 hours. I'm in trouble for missing a phone call because I was using the restroom. So a lot of times I had to make my best guess, and yes, amazingly, my best guess was always wrong. She was always coming after me with artificially compressed deadlines, so I usually had to send her work without having the amount of time I'd prefer to proofread, double-check, etc. Sometimes I thought she was moving the goalposts. Often she would say, "I told you to do X not Y," and I'd think, though I'd never say it out loud lest I face her wrath. "I don't think you did actually." And sometimes it was 100% clear that she was just inventing reasons to berate me. See, for example, 4-minute email. When I got the email that I wrote to you about, I knew deep down that she was just never going to let up. Clearly, she would find something to criticize whether I did something wrong or not, and in the end probably fire me, or bully me until I quit. That played out many times in the weeks before my firing. If I made a minor mistake, she lost her mind. If I didn't make a mistake, she would invent one. For example, she would email me to say things like, "The meeting has been over for 30 minutes. By this point you should have emailed me to ask what our next steps are." Maybe, but see above hesitancy to initiate contact with a volatile boss who finds fault with everything I say or do. I absolutely couldn't win and it was just a horrible, stressful, demoralizing experience. The good news is that I did find another job that I'm much happier with, though the first few weeks were very tough as I tried to put the experience with Martha behind me. I was afraid to ask questions, thought I was about to be fired every time I made a mistake, etc. But as time went by and it became clear to me that I was now working with reasonable people, it got much better. While I didn't get out in time, I'm grateful for you and the commenters because, as I said, it helped me to keep some perspective in the face of a person doing her best to destroy my faith in my basic competency. I really wish this hadn't happened to me, and while I'm happy in my new job, and it's a bump in both title and salary, I actually now have Martha's job title. Seriously, suck it, Martha. I would never say it happened for a reason. Or that I'm grateful for it in any way. The fact that someone could bully me like this, be 100% in the wrong, fire me, and get away with all of it is really hard to accept. But all I can do is look forward. My husband finally cut ties with his toxic mom and sister after they demanded we give up our house for my jobless sister-in-law and her family. My in-laws have a very toxic connection with my spouse and it is beginning to ruin my life. Growing up, my husband was my favorite, the golden child, and my mother-in-law was very close to him. Jacob has informed me that because his father was so busy at work, he and his mother spent a lot of time together. However, I've noticed that his sister, Sarah, is not treated equally by my mother-in-law. Although I am confident that my mother-in-law loves both of her children, I have repeatedly observed that she prioritizes my husband. I'm sure Sarah felt the same way growing up, which is why my husband has always attempted to fill the void by being a kind elder brother to her and always being there for her. But the truth is that Sarah and my mother-in-law would sometimes behave in such a ridiculous manner that it crossed the line. For example, when we initially started dating, Jacob, a recent college graduate, and my in-laws, including Sarah, shared a house. My in-laws had offered my husband a totally own level so that he could have his own privacy and welcome whomever he pleased. This is why he would occasionally invite me to his home to spend the night with him. However, several times in the morning, Sarah would storm into our room while we were asleep without knocking. As you may guess, we were not always properly dressed, but she would act as if everything was normal and begin talking to Jacob about utterly random topics. This was very strange for me because I was uncomfortable with her seeing me in my lingerie. Before anyone points out, I absolutely understand that Jacob was living with his family at the time, so I should have expected this, but is knocking on the door before entering really that much to ask? I suppose siblings can be quite close, but she and I didn't know each other very well when Jacob and I first started dating, so I thought it was really rude. Naturally, I spoke with Jacob about it and informed him that I would not be going over unless he installed a lock on his door. He agreed. But as you can guess, Sarah, who attempted to storm into the room the next morning but was unsuccessful, began ranting at us about why the door was locked. She began jiggling and hammering on the door, begging her brother to let her in. Jacob eventually let her in, and she stormed into the room, asking why he had set the lock in the first place. When she recognized me, she pointed to me and began ranting at him, asking if it was because of this skank. I was astonished by how harsh and insulting she sounded. Jacob told Sarah that he wanted to install the door lock, but Sarah was not convinced. She angrily informed him that they were siblings and should not keep any secrets between them. Jacob told her that he had no secrets, and that he had put the lock so she wouldn't barge in when we were asleep, which was quite disturbing. Sarah violently flipped her head towards me and exclaimed that it was all my fault, saying that I was interfering with her and her brother. This was too much for me, as I am generally non-confrontational, so I excused myself to visit the restroom. I could hear her yelling, with Jacob attempting to calm her. When she eventually left, Jacob came in to comfort me. He apologized for her actions and informed me that he would speak with her again so she could apologize to me as well. When I arrived the following weekend, Sarah apologized and offered me a pitiful excuse, claiming that she needed to speak with Jacob urgently and so believed it would be good for me to come in. Jacob forcefully asked her not to bother us again, and she agreed sheepishly. Although this issue appeared to be remedied, it was not the only strange conduct she demonstrated towards Jacob. If Jacob and I differed on something, even something as trivial as movies, and Sarah was around, she would begin telling him that he should date someone with comparable likes, meaning that we were unsuitable for each other. Jacob would give her a condemning look, but she would simply smirk. Another episode was Sarah asking me awkward questions about my background in an attempt to delve into my life. Jacob and I had been open about our past since the beginning, but I didn't feel comfortable addressing it with his sister. Regardless of my thoughts, she would ask me questions like, "Why did your ex break up with you? Were you not suitable for him?" Can make remarks like, "My brother's previous girlfriend was far more attractive than you." All of these queries and comments arose when she and I were alone. I began to suspect that she was trying to play a game with me, bringing me down. I initially kept my lips shut, but as the situation progressed, I had enough. One day, I responded to her taunting by stating, I liked my ex-boyfriend's family better than Jacob's because he didn't have nosy, overbearing family members. Sarah was taken aback by my reply, which temporarily silenced her. Even though Sarah had a strange relationship with my husband, my mother-in-law was no exception. When I first entered Jacob's life, my mother-in-law ignored me, but once she discovered we were serious, she began acting as if I was attempting to steal her son away. She would purposefully ignore me at dinners and family gatherings, as if I did not exist. Jacob saw this occasionally and tried to talk to her, but she never changed. My mother-in-law once referred to me as stuck-up and spoiled, just because my parents put me to a private school while she was a public school teacher. I also know she tried to talk Jacob out of marrying me, telling him he should look for a better spouse. Fortunately, my spouse did not care about her view and proposed to me nonetheless. My mother-in-law and Sarah were shocked to learn that Jacob had proposed. Both contacted me, telling me that it was a horrible decision and that, because Jacob wouldn't listen to them, I should quit the relationship and return the ring. I found this quite strange and declined, stating that they were crossing a line by asking me to do something like that when I loved Jacob and wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. When they realized they couldn't persuade me, my mother-in-law reluctantly changed her mind, telling me that I should strive to be the best wife for him and care for him in the same manner she did for years. I was rather offended, but I tried not to take her remarks too seriously. Sarah, on the other hand, accused me of being a gold digger and claimed her brother deserved someone with higher status. She even threatened to expose me before our wedding so Jacob would not marry me. Following this conversation, I immediately spoke with Jacob about everything. He was taken aback by how disrespectful they were towards me. He challenged them, but my mother-in-law and Sarah continued to believe that I was unsuitable for him. Jacob told me to disregard them, assuring me that he loved me regardless of their opinions. Despite his reassuring remarks, I felt horrible that his own family would not embrace me. Jacob and I had already chosen to pay for our wedding ourselves, so when my mother-in-law offered to cover half of the cost, we politely declined. Despite Jacob's reassuring remarks, I felt horrible that his own family would not embrace me. Jacob and I had already planned to pay for our own wedding, so when my mother-in-law offered to cover half of the costs, we politely declined, with Jacob explaining how hard we had worked to save money specifically for this occasion. Instead of being happy for us, she became even more angry, and she began telling Jacob how sad she was that he no longer needed her. However, Jacob's father appeared to be quite pleased with us. Unlike his sister and mother, his father was very calm and never had any issues with our connection. Since my mother-in-law continued to complain to Jacob, we made a compromise by telling her that we would love for her to organize the rehearsal dinner for us. She agreed, and we appreciated her generosity. However, when the wedding approached, events took an unexpected turn. The first instance came when Sarah invited herself to join us for supper, telling Jacob how much she missed him. Jacob and I were living on our own following our engagement, so we assumed she genuinely wanted to spend time with her brother. We agreed, and Jacob asked me directly if I was comfortable with having supper with her. I reluctantly consented, not wanting to be nasty to my soon-to-be sister-in-law. While we were enjoying our dinner, Sarah abruptly began discussing how much she despised cheating partners, claiming that cheaters were nothing but useless pieces of trash. We stared at her, curious about where she was headed with this. Then, out of nowhere, she looked me directly in the eyes and asked how it felt to be a useless piece of trash. My brow furrowed in perplexity as Sarah began to rant, accusing me of having an affair with my co-worker Zach. Jacob, also perplexed, asked her what she meant by saying. Sarah proudly hauled out photos of me and one of my co-workers, waving them around and claiming that she had caught me red-handed. I knew I'd never been unfaithful to Jacob, so I was curious as to why she assumed I was having an affair. Looking through the photos, they appeared to be entirely innocent. It's true that Zach and I were close co-workers, but only because we started at the same time and helped each other out when we made mistakes, so our manager wouldn't criticize us. Zach even had a girlfriend, which Jacob knew about. I don't have a lock on my phone, and I've always been open with Jacob about all of my colleagues. Sarah had turned these pleasant moments caught in photographs into something they were not. Evidence of a fictitious affair. In truth, they were far from it. Her false charges irritated me since it was obvious she was attempting to damage my reputation and disrupt my connection with Jacob. Before I could defend myself, Jacob, stunned and plainly upset, moved in to help. He questioned Sarah why she was following me around and photographing me with my co-workers in public places without their permission. When Sarah heard this, she began rationalizing her behavior, claiming she simply wanted to investigate me because I was not of their status, and she was scared I was marrying Jacob to steal his money. Jacob told her unequivocally that her charges were false and that she was creating extra drama out of nothing. He tried to reason with her, telling her to stop spreading lies and attempting to destroy our relationship, but Sarah insisted that Jacob open his eyes to the obvious affair that was going on. I also tried to clarify that we were only co-workers, but Sarah insisted on her charges. As her charges grew more serious, the environment became strained. I had had enough and informed her that I was going to make a police report against her for illegally photographing and stalking me. Her look grew terrified as she inquired whether I was serious. I informed her I had all of the evidence. She had purposely tracked me and took these images without my permission, attempting to slander me with ludicrous lies. Sarah stared at Jacob and then back at me, arguing that she did everything to protect her brother and that it wasn't a big deal. She began imploring Jacob to speak with me, worried that if I filed a complaint it would jeopardize her profession and future. I strongly told her that she could only save herself at this time. Sarah inquired what I wanted. I assured her I wouldn't pursue the complaint if she kept away from my life. Sarah had no other option for escaping the situation at that point. She looked to her brother for support, but Jacob defended me, telling her that she should be grateful I was willing to let it go because what she had done was clearly wrong. Sarah reluctantly agreed to stay away from me, and we have not spoken since that day. Jacob still has a relationship with her, but she has never spoken to me again. The second incident occurred shortly before our wedding, at the rehearsal dinner. My mother-in-law, who had insisted on planning the meal, rebuffed our offer of assistance in any manner. She told us that she would take care of everything. However, when we arrived, it was evident that the preparations were far from what we had anticipated. The rehearsal dinner had plastic tablecloths on picnic tables and chilly Mexican food. My mother-in-law was upset throughout dinner, which marred the festive atmosphere. She drank excessively and began behaving inappropriately with the guests, repeatedly stating how she couldn't wait for the wedding to end and how stressful it had been, despite the fact that she had not contributed monetarily or assisted with the planning. Eventually, my father-in-law became irate and escorted her away. Sarah attempted to excuse her mother's actions, but my father-in-law refused to listen. As you might guess, the entire affair was a fiasco, and I began to worry that both my mother-in-law and Sarah would wreck the wedding the next day. That night, Jacob and I had our first disagreement. I informed him strongly that he needed to uninvite Sarah and his mother because, based on their actions, they would surely try to overshadow us at the wedding. My husband angrily protested, promising me that his father would be present and would not allow them to get away with it. Frustrated, I promised that if he didn't uninvite them, there would be no wedding the following day. Jacob was plainly taken aback by my demand, and even knowing how extreme I sounded, I was concerned about what they might do. I did not want to be embarrassed again in front of my family and friends on our wedding day. Jacob definitely lacked firm boundaries, but I hoped that this ultimatum would make him realize how much his family was interfering with our relationship. Thankfully, Jacob understood and made the proper decision. He called his father early in the morning to inform him that his mother and sister were uninvited. Phil didn't appear startled and promised Jacob that he'd make sure my mother-in-law and Sarah didn't show up there unexpectedly. Shortly after our chat with Phil, my mother-in-law and Sarah began contacting Jacob constantly, apparently trying to persuade him to let them attend the wedding. However, Jacob forcefully told them that he did not feel comfortable having them there because of how they had treated me throughout our relationship. Hearing this, my mother-in-law began accusing me of being a terrible influence and interfering with her relationship with her son. Sarah attempted to argue with him, but Jacob was certain in his decision. I felt horrible that Phil couldn't attend our wedding because of his wife and children. I even felt sorry about issuing the ultimatum. But all of my remorse vanished when I discovered from some of Jacob's cousins that Sarah and my mother-in-law had intended to wear white dresses to our wedding. The cousins informed me that in their family WhatsApp group, which only had female members, Sarah had encouraged the others to wear white as well, stating there was no reason for the bride to be the only one. I was astounded by how low they would go just to hurt me. After knowing this, I was relieved they hadn't been invited. Jacob missed his family, but he could see where I was coming from. Overall, we had a lovely wedding, and no one tried to outdo us. Since that day, my mother-in-law and Sarah have stopped talking to me entirely, which I am absolutely okay with. They only invited Jacob around for dinner or special events, which didn't bother me at all. Phil, on the other hand, was always kind to me, and we stayed in touch over the years. Jacob and I painstakingly saved money and finally purchased a new home this year. It was our first home, and we were overjoyed to own something so meaningful. Jacob's parents and Sarah did come to visit for a modest housewarming celebration, but I went to see my parents and spent time with my family instead. Now, to the major point, my mother-in-law contacted me unexpectedly last month. This was really surprising because Mom and I hadn't spoken since the day I married Jacob. Surprisingly, she casually inquired about my well-being and life circumstances. I was taken aback by her unexpected interest, but I responded pleasantly. Then she questioned how it felt to live in such a spacious house with only Jacob and myself. Her remark stung since Jacob and I had been trying to conceive for a long time but were unable to do so owing to infertility concerns. Jacob and I had mourned the thought of never having children, but we gradually accepted it. When I first got the news, I informed Jacob that if he wanted to marry someone else and have children, he could divorce me. But Jacob had always stayed by me, assuring me that it was fine to be childless as long as we had each other. Our families were aware of this, so my mother-in-law's comment was very painful. She then told me Sarah was pregnant again. I was astonished because this would be her sixth child. Jacob had told me how her husband was unemployed and did not believe in using contraception, which resulted in these accidental pregnancies. Sarah's boyfriend was the embodiment of laziness, doing nothing around the house to aid her or the kids. I've heard from Jacob that he treats Sarah like a personal maid. He never pays any bills in the house. Sarah works many part-time jobs, while he spends the entire day gaming. Regardless of how much everyone has talked to her, Sarah never breaks up with him. My mother-in-law then went on to add that because Sarah could no longer afford to work during her pregnancy, she thought Jacob and I should give up our apartment because it was too big for a childless couple like us. I was caught aback by her demand and struggled to find words. I inquired whether she was joking, but my mother-in-law responded that she was serious, that Sarah and her husband deserved to live in a larger house. However, because she did not have enough space in her own home to accommodate them, she invited them to come in with us. The weight of her news weighed in the air as I fought to keep my composure in the midst of the emotional storm. I emphasized to her that this was our house, which we were still paying for, and the idea of someone else moving in without our permission was intrusive and ludicrous. However, my mother-in-law said that she had already spoken with Jacob, who had allegedly consented to this. This was strange because Jacob and I were always open with each other, and I knew he would have told me if he had agreed to let his sister and her family stay with us. I firmly told my mother-in-law that because the house belonged to both me and Jacob, he couldn't grant permission without my agreement. No one was allowed to reside here unless both of us agreed. To reach a solution, I told her that I would be pleased to accommodate Sarah and her husband for a few days if they wished, but that they could not stay permanently. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, began yelling, arguing that as a responsible daughter-in-law, I was required to make room for Sarah and her husband. She also assured me that if I complied with her demands, all previous troubles would be forgiven. In rage, I cynically said, "Sure, I'll be pleased to let them take our place. But you see, we're still paying for it, and I'm confident that if Sarah and her husband move in, they will not assist with the mortgage or bills. So how about you take some responsibility and contribute to their living expenses? I'd be grateful if you could just cover the mortgage, and we'll manage the rest. Of course, with only one job, you'll definitely need a second one to cover the home payments. Please let me know when you intend to get that second job." Hearing this, my mother-in-law exploded in wrath, shouting and voicing her dissatisfaction. She said it was crazy of me to want her to pay the mortgage, and I responded that it was equally ridiculous for her to expect us to care for Sarah's family and allow them to move in. This infuriated her even more, and she continued to yell, while I smiled with satisfaction. She eventually disconnected the call when she saw I wouldn't give in to her demands. Soon after, Sarah called and yelled at me for daring to ask her mother to pay our mortgage. She went on to add that she had always known I was a gold digger. I informed her that she was the gold digger, attempting to live with us without contributing. I added that if she wanted to know who the true gold digger was, she could look at her own partner, who did nothing to assist her. This appeared to silence her. I firmly told Sarah that she could argue with me all she wanted, but I would never let her family into our home unless they agreed to help with the mortgage. She accused me of being cruel and putting money before family. The tables had turned, and I was relieved at the thought of sticking up for myself and refusing to back down, taking control of my home. However, I feel a little awful thinking about my ex-husband, and I'm here on Reddit wondering if what I've done makes me the villain. Update 1. Thank you to everyone who has expressed their support. To answer the most crucial question that everyone keeps asking, why would my mother-in-law demand such a stupid thing of us? It's because she has always been so entitled. Clearly my husband has tolerated this charade for far too long, and he and I need to sit down and have a serious discussion about it. It's heartbreaking how my mother-in-law can lie about her own kid in order to get her way. My sister-in-law is a pawn in her game, doing whatever her mother-in-law wishes because my mother-in-law has always favored my husband. Sarah simply listens to what her mother says in the hopes of garnering favor as well. In this situation, Sarah stood to benefit because she could rely on us to pay her expenses and care for her children while her useless husband did nothing. I'm waiting for my spouse to return from his business trip so we can discuss. I do not want to discuss this over the phone since it is too important. Update 2. It's been 3 days since I last updated. As I indicated earlier, I was waiting for my husband to return. When he returned, we finally sat down and talked. I told him how his mother had called and demanded that we give up our house to his sister and her family. Jacob was definitely taken aback, so I gave him the whole story. He subsequently said that he had no idea about any of it. Prior to his journey, his mother had only told him that his sister was pregnant. That was all he knew about the situation, and he had no idea his mother would make such unreasonable demands. I informed him forcefully that I expected him to speak with his mother and deal with the matter because I couldn't bear his family anymore. He agreed. Jacob confronted his mother and questioned why she had lied to me about him. When caught red-handed, my mother-in-law attempted to backtrack, claiming that she had not actually lied. She said that she knew Jacob would have no objections to his sister staying with us, so she took matters into her own hands and approached me personally. Jacob stopped her off and questioned why she thought he would be fine with Sarah and her entire family coming in. My mother-in-law explained that because Jacob and Sarah were close, he would naturally want to support her by allowing her family to come in. Hearing this, I closed my eyes in disgust, but remained silent, allowing Jacob to handle his mother. Jacob then firmly told her that he was not going to let Sarah, her unemployed husband, and their 6 children move in with us. He also stated that she had no authority to compel us to take care of them. My mother-in-law started yelling, stating Sarah desperately needed aid at this time. But Jacob informed her it was not our job, and if she wanted to help, she could care for Sarah herself. My mother-in-law then said that Phil didn't want them in their small house, although we lived in a larger house and could easily help out. She even had the audacity to suggest that, since I was childless, assisting Sarah's children would make me feel fulfilled. My eyes widened with surprise, but for the first time, I noticed Jacob's face shift color. He raged at her, stating she had no right to say such rude things about me and couldn't use it to compel me to care for Sarah's children. Jacob went on to say that Phil didn't want anything to do with Sarah since she had turned into a child birthing machine and that he was over both of them. My mother-in-law tried to backtrack again, but Jacob would not have it. He informed her that he had done his best to keep a positive connection with them, even after they had repeatedly disrespected me, but he couldn't take it any longer. My mother-in-law begged him, but Jacob assured her that this was our home and I was his wife. Anyone that offended me disrespected him as well, and they did not deserve to be in his life. Jacob ended the call with those final words. Since then, he has not spoken with Sarah or his mother. Phil summoned Jacob to speak, and after hearing the entire story, he understood why Jacob had made such a severe move. Phil apologized to me on behalf of his wife, but I informed him that it was not his responsibility. Update 3. It has been an interesting 2 weeks. A lot of people suggested that I install cameras around our house in case my mother-in-law and Sarah wanted to show up and cause a commotion. So I purchased several cameras online and installed them. As luck would have it, they showed up last weekend, banging on my door while I was alone at home. When I saw them through the camera, I quickly called Jacob, who told me he was on his way. I answered the door, and there they were, my mother-in-law and Sarah, both furious. They requested that I let them in, but I refused and told them that if they had anything to say, they could do so from the outside. My mother-in-law began ranting at me, accusing me of being callous, greedy and selfish. I politely informed her that this was our home, and they had no right to enter uninvited. She continued her tirade, unknowing that the cameras were recording every moment. I reminded her of our prior chat, emphasizing that I would not give up our house for Sarah and her family, and that if she had anything else to say, she could wait for Jacob's return. Sarah then began yelling, accusing me of breaking up the family for no reason, being a gold digger and attempting to take her brother away from them. I informed them that everything they said was being recorded and that I would use the footage to obtain a restraining order if necessary. Their eyes widened in surprise as my mother-in-law exclaimed that I wouldn't dare to do that. I smirked and informed her that if they did not leave the property immediately, they would receive a legal notice very soon. This worried them, and Sarah tried to convince me that I was overreacting, saying that it wasn't a big problem. Fortunately, Jacob came at that exact moment. He approached them casually, asking what they were doing. My mother-in-law raced to hug him, but he resisted and forcefully demanded why they had come. Sarah stated that I was attempting to control his life by separating him from them and that they had come to face me. Jacob reiterated that it was his decision to avoid touch, and he did not want anything to do with either of them. My mother-in-law begged for forgiveness, but Jacob merely told them to leave the property or he would call the cops. They were visibly taken aback, apparently not anticipating this reaction from him. Jacob went on to say that if they ever came up at our house again, we would contact the police and have them removed forcibly. They fled, devastated, but Jacob no longer cared. I was relieved that my spouse had finally spoken up for me. Jacob has now spoken with Phil, who was as surprised as we were that my mother-in-law and Sarah had gone behind his back to show up unexpectedly. Phil informed us that we were correct not to let them in and expressed disgust with their behavior. With Jacob being so stern about kicking them out, I doubt they'll dare to return to our property. If they do, I will contact a lawyer right away. I am relieved that my husband has finally learned how toxic his family is, and I hope this is my final update. I'm ready to move on from this circumstance and continue our lives peacefully. My fiancé asked for an open relationship just weeks before our wedding. Am I the asshole for canceling the wedding? We were less than 2 weeks away from getting married when she asked me to accompany her to therapy. She was already seeing a therapist on her own and asked me to join her for a conversation before the wedding so we could be entirely honest with each other. That sounded unusual to me. I assumed we were already entirely honest with one another. After all, we were getting married in 2 weeks, right? She was also quite protective of her therapy sessions and did not discuss them openly. I'd never met her therapist, so being welcomed there felt out of place. The day came, and I attended the session. To protect myself, I kept my phone open and recorded audio. My fiancé had already arrived and I had to wait 20 minutes before being let inside. The therapist greeted me, shook my hand and we exchanged light talk. She informed me I wasn't as my fiancé had portrayed me. I assumed she was attempting to congratulate me. The therapist then turned to my fiancé and told her, "This may be more difficult than we anticipated." That freaked me out. but I remained calm, smiled politely, and did not respond. The therapist gave a brief speech that I do not like to repeat. As the therapist began emphasizing that we live in a modern world, my fiancée grasped my hand and expressed her desire for us to have a non-traditional marriage in the future. I grinned, not quite knowing what that meant. I assumed she was referring to seeking an equal partnership in which she would not be expected to give up her job or independence, a current girl power message. But it was something else entirely. She was talking about wanting to be able to sleep with other men once we married. I was stunned. It's 2018, I reminded myself, but seriously. She went on to say that she deeply loved me and would not be happy with me having the same freedom since the thought of me being with other women would break her heart. She couldn't take the idea of someone else stealing me from her. I allowed them to finish chatting. They both appeared to gain confidence, most likely as a result of my silence. It felt like they had practiced this. After they were finished, I asked the therapist if she was licensed. Her reply indicated that she had not expected that to be my first question. She agreed, so I instructed her to explain to my fiancé why we would not be marrying and would no longer be a couple, effective immediately. I wished them both luck and exited the office. I'm considering reporting to the therapist. I'm not sure whether I should report her to the clinic or a licensing board, but I believe there was some professional misconduct and I want her to be held accountable. That session did not go well for me at all. To be clear, that conversation would never end well. Even if my fiancé had wanted an open marriage in which I could sleep with other women, I would still have called off the wedding. That is not a marriage. It is a fake. It's also occurred to me that she might have already cheated on me. Looking back, certain things do not add up, and now that I have clarity, I feel foolish. I listened to the recording again, and I still can't believe what they said. Anyway, I called the wedding off. I'm normally a laid-back guy. I avoid arguments and conflicts because I follow principles and utilize common sense. Perhaps that gave my ex the impression that I was a pushover, but she was completely mistaken. After listening to the recording a few times, I'm convinced the therapist understood I wasn't how my fiancé described me in their sessions, hence the comment, "This may be harder than we thought." Now that the wedding has been cancelled, people are starting to ask questions, and I'm not sure how to handle it. I'm sure my ex is conducting damage control, but I have the video, and if she goes too far with her version of events, I won't be afraid to tell others what she was truly proposing. My parents and family also want answers, but I'm not sure what my ex has told them. I don't want them to think I was a fool for allowing things to progress to the point where she felt comfortable enough to tell me she wanted to sleep with other guys. She has also been blowing up my phone, my best friend's phone, and my brother's phone, saying, "We can work on this." She believes she did not understand what was stated during the therapy session and is willing to do whatever to make things right. This was the therapist's suggestion. She was opposed to it, etc. The final shriek of a dying siren. Her cries fell on deaf ears, and I owned those ears. We were also working on obtaining a loan to purchase a home, but I canceled everything. I effectively severed any ties we had, monetarily or otherwise. Her present appeal is that during treatment, she revealed her worries regarding our sexual history. I had much more partners than she did, and the therapist purportedly suggested that we level the field. Regardless of the truth, I'll report that therapist as soon as I figure out where and how. This post is largely a rant, but I'd like to know how you would handle questions from friends and family. My ex is definitely conducting her own damage control, and I don't want this to become a he said she said issue. I have the recording and was wondering if I should share it with the relevant parties. My ex does not know I have the recording. Small update, I'm at work and just received confirmation that the journal has been returned to my ex. I sent it early this morning via courier from our office and she had to sign a confirmation that she received it. As several have suggested, I concluded that reading it would be ineffective because she never accepted responsibility for the incident. Update 1. Aside from the jokes, the 2 weeks after my initial post have been intriguing. Last Monday, I spoke with a lawyer at work about my problem with the therapist. At first, he assumed I was joking and inquired about the prank. I offered to play the recording for him and he accepted. The next day, we reviewed the recording together, and he pointed out stuff I hadn't observed. The therapist consistently used language such as "we think," "we want," and "we decided." She never once said, "Your ex asked me to talk with you," or "Your ex wants you to know." It was always either "we this" or "we that." The lawyer inquired as to my ultimate goal, whether I intended to file a lawsuit. I informed him I wasn't going to sue, but I wanted to report the therapist to the relevant authorities. We decided to write 2 letters, one to the clinic where the therapist works and another to the American Psychological Association, APA, which validated her accreditation. By Wednesday, a few more people at work had become aware of the problem, including one of the case researchers. She looked up information about the therapist, including internet ratings and contact information for 2 of her prior clients. The therapist did not have the best reviews. Several people were furious with her, and we were able to reach 2 of them via social media. When we described the scenario, they were eager to assist. Their stories were not any better than mine. The letters expanded in length as we included signed reports from the other 2 people, as well as my personal explanation of how my ex changed after starting therapy and a thorough account of my session with the doctor. Last Friday, I met with my ex's parents. They arrived at my parents' place and we had a conversation. My ex was also present and further material was revealed, which was then included in the report on the therapist. This week, reports were sent out and the clinic responded. They called our office Thursday morning, most likely to see if the allegation was legitimate. We spoke with one of their lawyers over the phone, and after we determined it was serious, someone on the other end was heard saying, "Well, crap." They stated that they were treating the situation extremely seriously. One of my coworkers noted that the clinic had received prior complaints, but never one this well documented, which could explain their prompt response. Their letter also stated that they were notifying the APA, which could have additional pressure. I'm not sure what will happen, but I consider my problem to be resolved. However, after speaking with the other 2 former patients, I strongly hope that the therapist will be probed. She sounds insane and certainly has a plan. She also wrecked their relationships, of whom one was a woman. Finally, my ex and her parents. My folks contacted last Friday and invited me to visit after work. When I arrived, I was surprised to see both my ex and her parents there. My initial thought was to go. This meeting was meant to be on my terms, but it appeared that she was attempting to control the situation. Let me tell you, it was not going to happen. My ex waited for me outside. She looked great. If there was ever a girl you wanted your parents to meet, she was it. She informed me that they were coming to speak with me and see if we could resolve this. They did not refer to her parents. Either she never informed them what happened, or she told them a version of the story that they did not believe. She had a journal with her and stated that she began writing in it before treatment and continued until Friday morning. She said I should read it since it will clear up all the uncertainty. I informed her it wasn't a book club. I wanted to go inside and start the chat, but she requested for 10 minutes to talk before meeting with her parents. She continued handing me her journal and began crying. Then my sister arrived, followed by my ex's sister. They had been there all along and came out to check on us. So I took the diary, walked inside, said hello to everyone and then left my ex in the back of the garden, in the most remote part of my parents' yard. They have a spacious garden with plenty of trees and benches. She left her job owing to the stress, which resulted in a breakdown that never improved. She was no longer visiting her therapist. Initially, she began treatment for work-related issues, but it gradually turned to focus on our relationship, which appeared to be the only thing the therapist was interested in. She never explained to her folks why she became my ex. Now she was seeing a different therapist. I just listened. She shifted the subject to us, informing me that I would be in charge. I'd handle the funds, have access to all of her devices, and be able to track her activities. Any property we owned would be in my name, and she would do everything I asked to win my trust. She basically reaffirmed what she had been expressing in her messages throughout the previous weeks. She listed far more items than I can recall. I'm not sure how she believed this was a healthy way for either of us to live. I asked if she had cheated. She told me that she had the opportunity to cheat but never did. I believed her, but it made me angry. What exactly did she mean by opportunity? If you are in a committed relationship, you do not place yourself in a position where infidelity is even a possibility. You do not want the opportunity. It's similar to stating, I had the opportunity to kill someone today. Why? What were you doing that resulted in such an opportunity? And why term it an opportunity, as if it were something good? That pretty much concluded our 10 minutes. I told her we should go talk to our parents, and we did. I requested our sisters to leave us alone since what we were about to discuss was not their concern. My sister huffed and puffed, but a stone home can withstand hurricanes, and she wasn't one. I detailed what happened. How the therapy session went and what I decided. I didn't say I had a recording since I didn't have to. My ex corroborated everything I had said, which astonished me. Her father had teary eyes, which shattered my heart. Her mother inquired if this was how she felt they had raised her and requested an explanation. My ex basically told them the same story. Work-related stress, depression, a breakdown, therapy focusing solely on our relationship. The therapist convincing her that our relationship was the source of all her stress, that she needed an open relationship to avoid losing me, and that she needed to level her sexual experience with mine. She said my reply jolted her out of her slump. She has quit her job and is seeking something less demanding. She'll do anything to get me back. My ex referenced the diary again, saying that if I read it, it would explain everything, and that while she disagreed with the therapist's opinions, she went along with them since the therapist was an authoritative figure with experience. Our parents glanced at me and I said, "Someone's private journal is not the type of literature I read, unless they're a dead poet." A big mistake. My purpose was to convey that private journals only become literature when written by a writer or a leader, and that they are typically published after the author's death. I was also hoping they'd get the message that I didn't want to read her notebook since it wouldn't change anything. What had been done was done. Everyone looked at me as if I had wished death on my ex. You could sense the animosity in the air, so I gave in and muttered, "Fine, fine," promising to read the journal. You win some, you lose some, and then you use the incorrect words, resulting in even more losses. My ex is currently seeing a new therapist. She showed her parents the confirmation emails for her appointments. He's an older man with a white beard, much like Freud. I searched him up online. He is married, attends conferences and has written a couple books that are accessible on Amazon. Seems like a solid character. Then her parents said, "Can't you kids work this out?" That was the second thing that made me angry that day. As if this were child's play, and we should just listen to the adults since we were too young to control our emotions or judge what constitutes an irreversible betrayal. We were just kids who needed to work things out. So I reclaimed some ground after my earlier remark about the Dead Poets Society, and that was how the day concluded. We've known each other for 9 years and been in a relationship for 5. Even if there are real causes for her behavior, how can you return to normalcy? This was not even a reset. My perspective on my ex has shifted dramatically. She has become a stranger to me. Yes, I still find her appealing. Very attractive. There's no disputing how great she looked last Friday. But it was also calculated, I won't lie. Her hair was styled the way I like it, and she wore a dress I got for her as well as the shoes I prefer the most. I could even detect a bit of the perfume I had given her. The journal is on my nightstand. I have not read it and I doubt I ever will. I looked through it to see if it was actually a year old, and it is. As you work your way through the entries, you can see how the pages are folded and how the ink has aged. The pen she used was attached to the journal. When I examined it, it matched the ink, and the ink level appeared to be consistent with a year of use. It's not a forgery. Everything about it is compatible with a year of wear and tear. I don't see how reading it would help. It feels like a tool for playing with my psyche. Not really. I don't think she started writing it a year ago with the intention of using it for manipulation. If what she told me is true, her new therapist advised she share the journal with me. When people ask why the wedding is off, I tell them, we had a huge difference of opinion that we couldn't resolve. More or less. But if her sister discovers the true reason, which is likely given her tight relationship with their mother, everyone will find out soon enough. Our parents want us to meet again next week. They told me to read the journal, which might assist. Given our extensive history, perhaps we can work on it and start over. They believe she will receive therapy, recover and remain the lady I fell in love with, just not right now. They can see I still adore her. Otherwise, I wouldn't be so theatrical. I don't think I'll meet them next Friday, but she did look stunning. I'd like to thank the community for their support and assistance. It's been enough to help me develop a strategy for dealing with the therapist. Thank you to everyone who shared resources and information about what to do next. What do I do with her journal? Return it, keep it, or read it 90 years from now? Update 2. The therapist no longer works at the facility. The clinic's lawsuit is most likely the primary motivator for this decision. Someone unrelated to my case has sued them. I don't have any other information. The therapist attempted to reach me but was unsuccessful. I believe she learned about my report on her and requested more information, but who knows? I didn't interact with her. She was blocked and her questions remained unanswered. A faint voice in the back of my head suggests that filing that report may not have been the best move. It could attract unwelcome attention, and the persons behind the lawsuit could approach me for assistance. Despite this, I can't keep a satisfied grin off my face, knowing that the therapist is in trouble. To those who have questioned whether I have emotions, if this isn't proof enough, I'm not sure what would. And I hope you understand sarcasm. Mela, on the other hand, complicates matters considerably. I added a brief update to my previous post concerning her journal. I decided to return it, and I was quite clinical in my approach. On Monday morning, the courier we use at work handed the journal to her. I attached a note explaining why I had not read it. Everything came down to her refusal to accept responsibility for the situation. By giving me the journal, I felt she was washing her hands of the situation, putting the duty of finding solutions on my shoulders. In return, I washed my hands of it. To be honest, I felt a pang of sadness the moment they told me the journal had been returned. Perhaps I should have read it. Later that day, Mela arrived at my workplace. She didn't cause a scene, nothing like that. She waited patiently in the lobby. Her goal was to wait until I ended my workday and then talk to me. Naturally, I discovered she was present quite quickly. My options were to send her away or talk to her. So we talked. Several architects planned the end of our relationship. 1. Stress. This was something I was aware of, but I had never recognized how serious it was. In retrospect, when she began seeking for a therapist to help with work stress, I should have been more conscious of the issue. But she always said everything was all right, so why shouldn't I believe her? Whether she was seeing a therapist or not, she had a breakdown at work that she kept hidden from me and her family. 2. Miscarriage. I may have become a father. She miscarried. She told me she was a few weeks pregnant and wanted to make it special. However, a few days later, she began bleeding and that was it. She never told me about it because she was worried I would think she was unworthy. She knows how badly I want to be a father, and she assumed this would lead me to believe she couldn't bear children. This idea is completely ludicrous. 3. Friends. I made it clear in the comments that we had friends in open relationships. One such acquaintance phoned Mela over a year ago and invited her to lunch. She quickly began venting her feelings over her broken marriage onto Mela. Her husband, like me, had far more lovers than she did. In my situation, there were 26 previous partners, her husband had 70. He demanded an open relationship from the day they married, and she has been miserable ever since. Apparently, Mela would face the same fate if she did not take care of me. This friend informed Mela that I exhibited the same symptoms as her husband before they married. 4. Family secrets. Those we love are not always who we believe they are. Our fathers work in academia and have known each other for 30 to 35 years. They routinely go to work-related gatherings and parties, usually with their wives. I met Mela at one such occasion. I went with my father to meet a professor who could aid me with my career. Mela was there instead of her mother, who had a scheduling conflict, or so she was told. Her parents were having a difficult time as a result of her father's infidelity. Mela just learned about this recently, when she discussed the concerns raised by the previously mentioned friend with her mother. This was a great shock for her. Her parents always appeared to be the ideal couple, a role model. They certainly patched things up and maintained the appearance of a wonderful marriage throughout. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse combined with a therapist with questionable objectives, and that's how you end a relationship. The therapist was excited to plan my open relationship and validated what my friend had said. Men like me would never be pleased with only one woman. I would eventually seek more, and the only way to cure my cheating impulses was for Mela to sleep with other men until we evened out the numbers. Of course, I would be opposed to it, but that was okay. If I loved Mela, I could understand. This was a multi-layered concept. It would not only cure my alleged cheating conduct, but it would also affirm my love for her and enhance our bond. Naturally, this approach would have failed, and I believe that is precisely what the therapist was going for. Our relationship would not have survived. What the therapist did not foresee was how quickly I would react, or so I believe now. Mela and I met every day for the rest of the week, and she answered every question I asked her. One thing was clear, she was willing to fight for our relationship, whereas I was ready to leave things. At the end of the week, I had to depart for another city for work. The trip was intended to be 2 weeks, but it was extended to 4 weeks, more billable hours, Before leaving, I gave Mela a copy of the therapy session tape. She knew I had it. It was one of the first things I discussed with her when she arrived at my employment on Monday. Listening to the recording rattled her to her core. What she remembered about the treatment session differed significantly from what was on the recording. I believe she finally understood where all of my acts and conduct towards her originated from. During those 3 weeks, I had little interference from anyone and was left to my own devices. It was wonderful. Several individuals in the comments offered me a beer if I ever visited their city, and I accepted. It was my first time meeting another Redditor, and surprise, he was not a weirdo. He and his wife were excellent individuals. Mila paid a visit in the 4th week. We had been in communication for the preceding 3 weeks, discussing a variety of things, most of which were about us. One important concern was finalizing our honeymoon plans. We were meant to go to France for 2 weeks following the wedding, but neither of us could go right away, so it was scheduled for 3 months later, and it was quickly approaching. We already had non-refundable travel tickets and hotel reservations, but we no longer had us. That 4th week, we chatted more and decided to go to France as friends. I can already imagine eyes rolling. But France was incredible. Visiting a place like that reminds you that the United States is medieval in comparison. Americans are easily identifiable in museums. To be honest, learning how to act in foreign nations should be required in our schools. We returned from France as a couple again. It wasn't due to the magic of Paris though. We're not back to our previous selves yet and there's more work to be done. Several points we agreed on, in no particular order. 1. Mela is seeking for a new work that is less stressful. 2. Our friends in open marriages have been branded a toxic influence, and we will no longer socialize with them. 3. We both like the name Mela, and it will be used for our first daughter, thank you France. 4. Never hide anything from your partner, such as a miscarriage. I'm quite upset about this one. 5. We'll acquire a dog and a cat. 6. Mela will keep seeing her current therapist for a time. 7. When we do marry, it will be a simple wedding with only our immediate family. 8. We'll probably visit Italy next. I suppose this is not the thrilling update everyone was hoping for. Many of you requested an update, and if you were hoping for rage, hatred or revenge, I'm sure there is a version of this story in which those things are feasible. But as I've stated from the start, I didn't detest Mela. My actions were based on self-preservation at the moment. Her behaviors indicated that she wanted something other than what I believed we both agreed on. There is no reason to be concerned about her mental state. When her therapist's impact faded, she returned to her previous self, more or less. These events have unavoidably altered her, but she is now in a better state. You'll recall that she promised me control over her finances, tracking her location and full access to all of her devices. Aside from my disinterest in such a lifestyle, those were simply attempts to continue the conversation. We agree to be open with our devices, but we have always been, so nothing has changed there. We will continue to share our finances, as we have always done. Thank you to everyone who left comments and sent me private messages. Some of the advice I received was invaluable, and I'm eternally thankful. Writing these pieces and interacting with you all has been quite therapeutic, a great way to relieve stress.